Chapter 959. A dozen eunuchs and immortals hurriedly escorted Wuxia back to Nuyu's palace. Then hundreds of supreme towers appeared over the palace, completely sealing it off from inside and outside with a tremendous pressure. A cold and harsh warning rang in the ears of all the foreign immortals and itinerant cultivators who stayed in Yuxiong City. Everyone, stay where you are and wait for investigation. Anyone who dares to move will be killed. An elder from an immortal sect who had just submitted to Nuyu snorted unhappily. What's the fuss about? We are Nuyu's honorable elders, not its prisoners. What do you want? Even though he had received Nuyu's warning, the elder still flew up into the sky from one of the halls in the Temple of Honorable Elders. A ball of ghost fire fell from above and hit the elder, who did not take Nuyu's warning seriously. Even with the cultivation base of a 15th tier gold immortal, he could not withstand the burning of the ghost fire. In just a few seconds, he was burned into a wisp of smoke, and his soul flew up into the sky before it was sucked away by the strange force. All the honorable elders in the temple shut their mouths at the same time, and stayed in their residences obediently, not daring to go out. It was only then that they realized how strong Nuyu was, and that if they had not been instructed by an almighty expert to come to Nuyu, they would not have been treated so courteously by Nuyu. Now that Nuyu was clearly in a great mess, they did not bother to maintain such courtesy. Standing in front of the gate of Carefree Palace, Wuxia looked innocently at the large group of Nuyu soldiers around him and asked, "What are you doing? What's going on? Why are you so nervous? Ugh, what's going on?" An oracle in a black robe hurried over with a serious face. He bowed to Wuxia and said in a deep voice, "Please calm down, Lord Teeth. We will give you an explanation. Later on, someone will come and ask you a few questions. Please cooperate with them." Twitching his mouth, Wuxia snorted coldly and shouted, "I can calm down, but give me good wine, good meat, and beautiful women. You can't just leave me here, right? Oh, you even got a group of men to surround me. I don't have that kind of taste for men. Don't tell me it's for food." Licking his lips, Wuxia put on a greedy expression and grinned at the soldiers who had surrounded Carefree Palace. These officers and soldiers were frightened by Wuxia and hurriedly retreated a few steps. In just 2 hours, several supreme high priests arrived at Carefree Palace, escorted by more than a dozen generals. Wuxia was having a good time eating and drinking, while a dozen teenage girls were playing sumo wrestling beside him. Every now and then, he would take out large pieces of jade and gold, and throw them to these girls as rewards. He was having a great time playing with them. The few supreme oracles glanced at the jade and gold that Wuxia had thrown on the ground. The stone shell on the surface of the jade had been roughly scraped off, revealing the smooth jade flesh inside. Clearly, they were unpolished jades that had just been mined from the jade mines in the mountains. As for the gold nuggets, they were natural nuggets, some of which were embedded with stones of various sizes. Thinking of the true form of Lord Teeth that Wuxia had transformed into, the few old oracles could not help but nod. It would be strange if a demon who had cultivated into a Hayemo could produce exquisite jade artifacts and refined gold ingots. With his bare chest exposed, Wuxia stared at the few supreme oracles and shouted, "What are you doing here?" As he shouted, Wuxia raised the flagon and poured wine into his mouth. His eyes, which had turned red because of the alcohol, were fixed on the few girls who were wrestling with each other. Their snow-white skin was exposed, and Wuxia could not help but chuckle. The few supreme oracles glanced at each other and nodded again. "May I ask, Lord Teeth, where were you around noon today?" asked one of them in a soft voice. Licking his lips, Wuxia glared at them impatiently and said angrily, "Where could I have been? Weren't you the ones who arranged for people to accompany me to go shopping?" I touched the buttocks of a few girls along the way. Are you going to avenge those sluts?" Rolling up his sleeves, Wuxia rose to his feet with a laugh, then puffed out his chest and said, Come, let me play with you." The supreme oracles took 2 steps back, while a dozen 8 and 9 stars generals of Second Pangu Heaven stepped forward and stood in front of Wuxia. The supreme oracle who spoke just now said in a deep voice, "Lord Teeth was out shopping, and that seems to be true. May I ask what cultivation technique Lord Teeth is practicing?" That gave Wuxia pause. Staring at the few supreme oracles, he sneered and said, "It's none of your business what cultivation technique I'm practicing. Why are you asking me this? To immortals, the cultivation method they cultivated was their greatest secret. Unless it was someone close to them, they would absolutely not divulge any information related to their cultivation method. By asking such a question, the few supreme oracles had actually violated the great taboo of immortal cultivators. The oracle sighed and said in a deep voice, "Please forgive me, Taoist Lord. At noon today, the Emperor of New Yu was assassinated, and even his soul was destroyed. We've thoroughly investigated all the honorable elders and foreign itinerant immortals and cultivators in Yuxiong City. Please understand, Taoist Lord, and don't hurt the friendship between us." After pondering for a moment, the oracle said, "Taoist Lord, please show us the divine abilities and mystic arts you have practiced, so that we can peek into the essence of your magic power with our divine sense. As long as we are sure that you have nothing to do with the death of our emperor, New Yu will definitely offer you a gift." Rolling his eyes, Wuxia tilted his head and stared at the oracles for a long while. At last he nodded slowly and said, Remember, it was you who forced Lord Taoist today, so he had no choice but to do as you say. But remember, what happened today? Well, if you are willing to fill this storage ring with supreme great immortal stones, and give me 10,000 beautiful girls, I can swallow my anger." After rummaging in his sleeve for a while, Wuxia took out a storage ring with a length of 30 miles, and handed it to the supreme oracles. A storage ring with a length of 30 miles had to be filled with supreme great immortal stones. This was a blatant extortion. But the supreme oracles agreed without hesitation. They stared blankly at Wuxia, waiting for him to reveal the secret of his cultivation technique. Clearing his throat, Wuxia transformed into his true form of Hei Mo. His body was filled with a gloomy and evil inferno hellfiend energy, and the evil fiend aura made the supreme oracles frown. After sending their divine sense into Wuxia's body, and carefully searching for a quarter of an hour, they nodded with satisfaction and retracted their divine sense. At noon, after plotting against the black-clothed Taoist with the ecstasy incense, Wuxia had deliberately left a very weak immortal energy in the emperor's bedchamber. It was so weak that only an almighty expert would notice it. At the moment, Lord Teeth was exercising the Inferno Hellfiend scripture, and the fiend aura around him was so strong that it had nothing to do with the immortal energy of the Tao League. The officials of New Yu had been busy for 7 days and 7 nights, and more than 2,000 unlucky fellows in Yuxiong City had been thrown into prison and tortured, just because the aura of their magic power was slightly similar to the immortal energy Wuxia had left behind. These itinerant immortals were caught in an unjust calamity. As for whether they could come out of prison alive, Wuxia did not care. 7 days later, all the officials and people in New Yu received an earth-shattering news. The Emperor of New Yu, who had been busy with state affairs for several days, had finally coughed up blood and died. New Yu had made his eldest son, GMO, the new emperor, and after the emperor's funeral, he would choose a good and auspicious day for him to ascend the throne. At the same time, the emperor's funeral began to be held in a big way. According to the custom of the human race in Yu, all people were buried directly in the soil after death, including the human emperor. This was based on the meaning that heaven and earth created man, and the time was right for man to return to heaven and earth. But now that New Yu was under the influence of outsiders, its officials had collected a pile of the emperor's ashes and put them into a huge, luxurious coffin. Countless civil and military officials and members of the imperial clan were mourning the emperor in the palace, and the sound of mourning music spread almost throughout the whole city. As the chief honorable elder of New Yu who had been cleared of suspicion, Wuxia naturally had the right to attend the emperor's mourning hall. This was the first time New Yu had held a serious funeral for an important figure, so everything was in a hurry. In the vast hall, countless members of the imperial clan and courtiers were kowtowing to the emperor's coffin. On the square in front of the hall, 4,900 monks were chanting the rebirth scripture on the left, and 4,900 Taoists were dancing the Taoist dance on the right. Both sides were mustering their strength to expiate the souls of the dead, creating a foul atmosphere. Meanwhile, Wuxia stood at the entrance of the hall with a group of itinerant immortals with profound cultivation bases, looking at each other without saying a word. The emperor's soul had been sucked clean by Rakshasa, and he had died a very clean death. What was the point of expiating the souls of the emperor? However, the invasion of the human race by the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League was comprehensive, and the infiltration of culture and customs was an extremely important move. The emperor's funeral might be the beginning of a change in the customs of the whole of New Yu. Everything in New Yu would begin to be transformed into the kingdoms of the human race in outer heavenly realms, and eventually to a level that could satisfy the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. With a faint sigh, Wuxia shook his head and looked at the members of the imperial clan who were burning paper money and crying in the hall. According to the list obtained from Liangzhu, there were 13,947 members of Diyu's imperial clan, who had betrayed Diyu and fled to the southern region with the emperor. At the moment, there were more than 9,800 people in the hall. The others were either guarding various provinces or leading armies in a stalemate with Diyu. Now they were rushing back to Yuxiong City on Jimo's order to attend the emperor's funeral. What Wuxia was waiting for was the moment when these members of the imperial clan who had betrayed Diyu would gather together. And when the time came, he would kill them all in one fell swoop. He wanted to see how the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League could control New Yu without Diyu's imperial clan. He wanted to see what else they could do about the unjustifiable matter. Time passed slowly. 3 days later, all the important figures of New Yu's imperial clan and powerful clans had gathered in the Great Hall. The black-clothed Taoist, whose face was extremely unsightly, was escorted by a group of monks and Taoists. Chapter 960. Wuxia gave the black-clothed Taoist a glance and could not help but chuckle. So, you've spent a lot of money? The Taoist herself possessed the cultivation base of a peak-level primordial expert, and she was now followed by 36 monks and 36 Taoists, 6 of whom were primordial immortals, and 6 monks with the cultivation base of Buddhas. Moreover, the 6 primordial immortals were tall and ancient in appearance, and the 6 Buddhas had strange appearances, their eyes gleaming faintly as they glanced around. Clearly, none of them were ordinary figures. Currently, the Celestial Court and Buddhist League only had about 1,000 primordial immortals, but the Taoist, whose cultivation base had reached the peak of primordial immortal realm, was not among the primordial experts of Buddhist League that everyone knew. The 12 primordial experts behind her were also unknown in the past, and even the Celestial Court and Buddhist League themselves did not know their origins. Wuxia nodded to himself. A few days ago, when he was at Great Horns' place, he had talked a lot of nonsense to Wuxia, one of which was about the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs recruiting disciples. In the past apocalypses of heaven and earth, immortals were either killed or wounded, but the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs would always select some of their disciples as the true elites, protecting them with their mighty divine abilities and magic power, so that they could safely survive the apocalypses. Perhaps, under their protection, only 3 to 5 disciples managed to escape from certain death during each apocalypse of heaven and earth. But after so many apocalypses of heaven and earth, there were quite a number of primordial immortals and Buddhas who survived. Just like the revered elders who hibernated in the Temple of Revered Elders in Diyu's secret palace, these primordial immortals and Buddhas were also the secret forces of Tao League and Buddhist League. Perhaps only the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs knew exactly how many of them there were. Wuxia looked at the few monks and Taoists behind the Taoist. Apart from the Taoists, the monks' skin had a faint bronze luster, and when they grinned from time to time, their teeth shone with a translucent luster that looked like white glass. It was obvious that they were cultivating the most difficult and powerful cultivation method of the ancient Buddha. Nowadays, the Buddhas of Buddhism either cultivated dharmakaya, psyche power, meritorious virtues, or supernatural powers. Only the lineage of the ancient Buddhas cultivated their bodies, psyche power, and strength. As the saying goes, life and death cultivation. They used the cruelest means to train themselves in everything that could be trained. Any ancient Buddha who had achieved success in cultivation was more than 10 times stronger than the current Buddhas of the same realm. Just like the current Lord Buddha, Amitabha. If he were to fight with a Buddha who cultivated the ancient Buddhist cultivation technique and reached the peak of primordial immortal, the Buddha might be able to suppress Amitabha with just a flip of his palm. However, it was precisely because the might of the ancient Buddha's mental cultivation technique was so great that the process of cultivating it was filled with endless obstacles. All sorts of devils were endless, and the slightest carelessness could lead to the death of one's body and soul. Therefore, there were very few people in the Buddhist sect who cultivated the ancient Buddha's cultivation technique. Almost all the Buddhist cultivators had chosen the convenient, fast, and safe new cultivation technique. The power of 6 monks who had cultivated the ancient Buddhist cultivation technique and reached the realm of Buddha was extremely frightening. Narrowing his eyes, Wuxia watched as the black-clothed Taoist led the group of monks and Taoists out of the coffin, circled 3 times around it, and began to recite the rebirth scripture in a low voice. After circling the coffin 3 times, the Taoist led the monks and Taoists out of the funeral hall and stopped in front of the door. She squinted at Wuxia, then glanced at the many honorable elders standing near the hall. Suddenly she asked, "Who among you is proficient in the art of alchemy?" Her voice was hoarse and dry, like sand rubbing against each other. It was hard to tell that she was a woman. Wuxia pretended to be ignorant and stared blankly at the Taoist with an expression that said, "What the hell is the art of alchemy?" Among the honorable elders, a few old Taoists with long beards and excellent bearing walked out slowly, cupping their fists and bowing proudly to the Taoist. These old Taoists were all famous elders of alchemy sects in outer heavenly realms, and their skill in alchemy was pretty good. They could not see through the overall strength of the Taoist and the monks and Taoists behind her, nor did they know who she was. In any case, when she asked who was proficient in alchemy, they could not wait to step forward in order to make a name for themselves and fight for benefits for their sections. The Taoist gave a cold laugh and gave a soft cry. Behind her, a skinny monk with the cultivation base of a Buddha waved his hand, and a lotus flower emerged from his palm. The few old Taoists were sucked into it and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. All the sinecures were shocked. They took a step forward, wanting to reason with the black-robed Taoist, but an extremely frightening wave of magic power spread out from the Taoist's body, suppressing these sinecures so much that they dared not move even a finger. "You know how to concoct pills? Good, good, good." Unleashing the pressure of a primordial expert to suppress all the honorable elders, the Taoist sneered and said, "You know how to concoct alchemy? Very good." It suddenly dawned on Wuxia that the Taoist knew she had been tricked by an extremely clever knockout drug, and that was why she had done the absurd thing of sucking the emperor dry. But for the sake of face, she did not tell the supreme oracles of Nuyu about it. It seemed that she was going to investigate the assassination of the emperor by herself. But Wuxia would not give her the chance. After the Taoist and the others left the Great Hall, GMO and the others began to officially preside over the emperor's funeral. Together with the members of Nuyu's imperial clan and civil and military officials, he knelt before the coffin and wailed bitterly. A few gray-haired old courtiers stood beside the emperor's coffin, holding a yellow scroll in their hands and reciting the emperor's great achievements in a trembling voice. The great hall was filled with cries and shouts. The filial sons and grandsons, on the other hand, were using all their strength to show off their feelings of remembrance and longing for the emperor of Nuyu. The Taoist's unkind eyes glanced back and forth between the faces of the silent honorable elders, and when she suddenly saw Wuqi's strange smile, she snapped coldly, "What are you laughing at, Lord Teeth?" Wuqi giggled. Suddenly, he soared into the sky, a sheet of white flame shooting out of his palm and enveloping the entire palace in an instant. With a temperature that could burn everything and a terrible aura of annihilation, Yuanling's true flame rolled across the palace, turning the morning hall into ashes in an instant. Without giving the Taoist and the primordial immortals and Buddhas any time to react, Yuanling's true flame burned more than 10,000 members of Nuyu's imperial clan, and tens of thousands of important civil and military officials into nothingness. Tens of thousands of souls soared into the sky, and the strange force surged over again, about to escort them into the void. However, the surrounding space was burned into nothingness by the Yuanling true flame. Large amounts of Yuanling true flame condensed into restrictive runes in the void, completely imprisoning this side of the world. In just a trillionth of a second, before the souls could be taken away, Yuanling's true flame had attached itself to them, and turned them into wisps of smoke that drifted away. Then Wuqi's body trembled, and a crisp cracking sound rang out from his limbs and bones. The force that came from a great distance to suck away these souls lost its target, and immediately struck back at Wuqi, almost shattering his strong fleshly body. Vaguely, Wuqi seemed to hear the angry scolding of several people. Wuqi smiled faintly. He finally understood the source of this force. The 9 Daozu had used some kind of supreme artifact of primal as their true form, and they had crafted a strange artifact similar to the investiture of the gods. Under the protection of their magic power, the artifact would immediately sense the soul of anyone who died on Pangu continent. Through the artifact's active identification, the soul of an ordinary mortal would be allowed to enter transmigration, but if it was a special soul, it would be sucked into the artifact and stored, waiting to be used to become a deity in the future. But an artifact was an artifact after all, and it could always be used. Wuqi had sealed off the void with all his magic power, delaying the insignificant power of the artifact for just a moment. In such a short time, the Yuanling True Flame had destroyed the fleshly bodies of the members of the imperial clan and the civil and military officials. Their souls were immediately injured by the Yuanling True Flame as soon as they flew up, turning into wisps of smoke and dispersing. While laughing strangely, Wuqi twisted his body, turned into a stream of chaotic energy, and disappeared without a trace. 9 terrible divine senses plunged straight down from the void, but they suddenly lost all traces of Wuqi. Unwilling to give up, they circled the city hundreds of times, then spread out and searched the entire Pangu continent in the blink of an eye. But Wuqi's escape art was very exquisite. With his current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to fight a Dao-fusing expert head-on. But if he just hid his aura, who could find him? While he was hiding, his clone in the East Sea City was releasing a faint aura. The 9 divine senses scanned through Wuqi's clone, not paying much attention to Wuqi's clone. Hiding in the void, Wuqi slowly exercised his movement technique and sped toward the East Sea. He smiled complacently. The 9 old Taoists had suffered a great loss this time, and he wondered how they were going to vent their anger. Wuqi had killed tens of thousands of important chess pieces right under their noses, and almost all the higher-ups of New Yu were killed. Let them be angry, let them be depressed, and let's see how they are going to play this game of chess. What made him most proud was that Wuqi had found a way to deal with the strange force. After this attempt, Wuqi had 100% confidence that he could kill the person he wanted to kill. However, it would be a very big risk. Perhaps if he killed the person again, he would immediately be hunted down by the 9 old Taoists. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Wuqi would never clash head-on with that strange artifact. Coughing up mouthfuls of blood, Wuqi gradually absorbed Pangu's sacred energy and natural energy to slowly heal his wounds. Although it was satisfying to kill the upper echelons of New Yu in one fell swoop, the counterforce of the magical artifact was simply appalling. Not only that, it contained a wisp of the essence power of the 9 old Taoists, and even a wisp of the essence power of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs. His body was nearly disintegrated by the counterforce. If it had not been for his extremely strong fleshly body, and the mystic art he had used in time to neutralize 90% of the counterforce, he would have been in deep trouble today. As he repaired his body and made his way back to the East Sea, he suddenly heard a deafening roar that shook the entire Pangu continent. It was the roar of great horns. Bullshit. Why would Lao Tzu go and kill a few mortals who are not even worthy to be called ants? If it was Lao Tzu is your grandson. If it was not Lao Tzu, and you are Lao Tzu's grandson, do you dare to bet with Lao Tzu? Wuqi burst out laughing. The 9 old Taoists were so anxious that their eyes turned red. Go and find trouble with Great Horns and the others? Well, you've got the wrong guy. Humming a little tune proudly, Wuqi returned to the East Sea City and sat quietly in the underground spirit cave. His mind was immersed in the boundless void inside of him, where a vigorous dragon-shaped emperor energy was twisting and struggling inside Wuqi's body. Chapter 961. Although he was in seclusion in the spirit cave, Wuqi was still receiving a steady stream of information from the outside world through Princess Zhongli. After the death of the emperor, all the members of the imperial clan were killed by Wuqi, and all the important civil and military officials were either killed or wounded. Under the leadership of a black-clothed Taoist who called himself Ming Hao, Nuyu had found a child who claimed to be the emperor's illegitimate son, and made him the emperor of Nuyu. When all the civil and military officials of Nuyu were killed or wounded, it was Ming Hao who took the initiative to select a group of barely usable people from the clansmen of those civil and military officials to fill the empty court. It was the same for many of the border generals, who had selected the best of the best and urgently sent them to various military towns and cities. But things were always so strange. No matter how hard Ming Hao struggled, Nuyu's army was always routed on the battlefield. Often, as soon as the Great Yu army arrived, Nuyu's army would flee or simply kneel down and surrender. In just a month, the Great Yu army led by Emperor Haozuan, together with the two armies led by the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and the deities of the Yen Emperor Shinong, had recovered 70% of Nuyu's territory, and were now heading straight for the city of Yuxiong. 2 months after Wuqi went into seclusion, Diyu's army came to Yuxiong. Ming Hao boldly led a large number of primordial experts to defeat the Great Yu army and save Nuyu. But in the face of Emperor Haozuan, whose cultivation base had broken through to the realm of Dao breaking and wielding the Xianyuan sword, Ming Hao was severely wounded by a single sword strike. Fortunately, the 8 Apsaras had laid out a formation to block the emperor, and he had escaped with the protection of a group of monks and Taoists. Diyu's army conquered Yuxiong and completely wiped out Nuyu. The common people in the city were demoted to sinners and distributed to Diyu's meritorious officials as slaves, while all the other officials and their families were killed. On top of that, countless immortals and cultivators from hundreds of immortal sects who had defected to Nuyu were besieged and killed by Great Yu's army. Hundreds of immortal sects were massacred, and even their immortal birds and spirit beasts were slaughtered, leaving no one alive. Even the supreme oracles who had betrayed Diyu seemed to have taken the wrong medicine. Under Emperor Haozuan's offensive, they could not withstand a single blow, as if they had lost their minds and were slaughtered by Diyu's oracles like lambs. According to the secret agents of the East Sea, 3 days after Diyu invaded the city, Nuyu's supreme oracles were still fighting Diyu's oracles in the sky. From time to time, huge supreme towers fell with bailoff smoke, smashing into the mountains and severing countless rivers. 7 days later, there were no more sounds of fighting in the sky, and then Diyu's oracles gradually returned from the sky. Diyu's supreme oracles suffered almost no losses, while all the supreme oracles of Nuyu were killed. Like the other clans in Nuyu, their clansmen were slaughtered by Diyu's army, and even their infants were killed by soul-destroying curses. After the battle, Diyu's reputation soared. With this, Emperor Haozuan issued imperial edicts to all the human kingdoms around the world, ordering them to submit to Diyu, or else he would personally lead an army to wipe out all the small human kingdoms. For a time, Diyu, which had shown signs of decline, regained its prestige and expanded its army, preparing to launch an expedition. The human kingdoms who received Emperor Haozuan's edict were in a state of panic, and under the instruction of the immortal sects behind the scenes, they were also frantically preparing for the war. In terms of total population, all the human kingdoms in outer heavenly realms accounted for about 80% of the total population of Diyu, together with the immortals of the Celestial Court and the cultivators of the Buddhist League. As long as all the human kingdoms in outer heavenly realms were united into one power, they would be able to fight against Diyu. According to the intelligence sent back by the secret agents of the East Sea, after receiving Diyu's edict, the Ling dynasty's attack on the human kingdoms suddenly became more than 10 times fiercer. Zhang Tingyun even appeared on the front line several times to boost morale, and took several powerful human kingdoms under his control. The secret agents even saw Zhang Tingyun behead the emperors of the enemy kingdoms in front of countless soldiers on the blood-drenched battlefield, extracting the purple energy that looked like flood dragons from their bodies and swallowing it. After getting the intelligence from the secret agents, Wuqi could not help but nod to himself. It seemed that the Emperor Aura was very useful. At the very least, the Emperor of Nuyu was killed, and Wuqi robbed him of his Emperor Aura. The destruction of Nuyu in just 2 months was a ready-made example. In the spirit cave, where the natural energy was so abundant that energy crystals had begun to form, Wuqi sat cross-legged under the heaven refining cauldron, his vast divine sense swirling around his divine soul like a nebula. Every particle of his divine soul was trembling, contacting and flowing with the laws of the heavenly Tao, searching for information about the Emperor Aura. The heavenly secrets were messed up by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs, and later by the 18 saints. Now the heavenly secrets were in a complete mess, and no one could figure out how it worked. Wuxi's divine sense fused with the chaotic torrent of the heavenly Tao, letting it flow freely with it. Occasionally, he could come into contact with some information about the Emperor Aura, which was immediately absorbed and stored by his divine soul. Bit by bit, the data was stored, and Wuxi separated the wheat from the chaff. Relying on the faint connection of his divine soul, he fused the information that pointed directly to the essence of the Emperor Aura, and gradually restored its original appearance. At the same time, the enormous stream of Emperor Aura in Wuxi's body was being extracted by the primal purple energy bit by bit, gradually disintegrating and melting. Wuxi's divine sense fused with the disintegrated Emperor Aura, and from it, he began to comprehend the various strange powers contained in it. There seemed to be lightning flashing and thunder rumbling before his eyes. When Wuxi's divine soul was completely immersed in the Emperor Aura, and his divine sense was completely integrated with the heavenly Tao, countless illusions flashed before his eyes. On the primitive continent, there were countless giant beasts and demon birds, and human beings were as weak as insects, being hunted and killed by those beasts and ferocious birds at will. There were also powerful gods high up in the sky, who could summon the wind and summon the rain. From time to time, they would raise a terrible storm that could instantly destroy a human tribe, or spread a plague that could instantly wipe out dozens of human tribes. Newborn human beings were weak and incompetent, and they could only struggle to survive in that extremely dangerous environment. After dozens of generations, the most outstanding human beings finally activated the bloodline inherited from the great Saint Pangu and the other 100 spirits. Their intelligence and fleshly bodies were greatly improved, and they began the first evolution of the humankind. They had smart minds and strong bodies. Led by the first batch of evolved human beings, they built houses to shelter themselves from the wind and rain, lit bonfires to drive away wild beasts, roasted food to strengthen their bodies, and used herbs to dispel plagues and cure their people. There were also those powerful warriors who protected their people. They used crude wooden sticks and stones as weapons to kill powerful beasts and fierce birds, protecting the humankind through the most dangerous period of the human race's birth. Those outstanding people became the leaders of the tribes, and the growing tribes began to communicate with each other. As a result, the individual tribes formed strong alliances. At last, as the humankind developed and grew stronger, the small alliances merged with each other, and eventually developed into the alliance of the entire humankind. A single human being was weak and incompetent, but when countless human beings gathered together, their power was strong enough to destroy the world. The wisest and strongest person was elected as the leader of the alliance, leading the entire humankind forward. In the newborn human society, any invention that was beneficial to mankind, would be bestowed a great amount of virtue by the heavenly Tao. As for the early ancestors, they were pure and simple. They had an untainted and pure heart. They respected the leader who led them to the development of the alliance. This respect was hot and pure, the purest and most primitive power of faith. The power of faith of countless human beings gathered on the leader, fused with the virtue bestowed by the heavenly Tao, and combined with the great aura of tenacity and courage to fight against the heaven, the earth, the ghosts and deities, and all the living beings under the heaven and earth. It finally merged into the original aura of the human emperor. The original aura was acknowledged by the heavenly Tao, fused with the fortune of the heavenly Tao, and eventually evolved into the present aura. The aura was the faith of a human kingdom to its supreme leader, and the faith of its billions of people. When the aura was lost, the people's hearts would collapse, and the fate of the kingdom would collapse, just like how Nuyu was completely destroyed by Diyu in just 2 months. It was like a man's 3 souls and 7 spirits were completely disordered. How could he have the strength to resist the invasion of foreign enemies? Therefore, whether it was Jie or Zhou, before a kingdom was destroyed, the aura of despair would first rise from the human emperor. The aura of despair would replace the aura of the human emperor, causing chaos in the imperial court from top to bottom. As a result, the people had no way to live, and eventually the kingdom was destroyed. Therefore, when a kingdom was destroyed, there must be a fatuous ruler. This was the effect of the disordered aura of the human emperor. Wuxia nodded to himself. Only the power of virtue, faith, and the fortune of the heavenly Tao could produce the aura of the human emperor. Moreover, this power of faith was different from the power of faith of Buddhism. The power of faith of Buddhism was used to refine one's body and sarira, while the faith in the aura of the human emperor must be the faith of the people under his rule in the occupation of the emperor. In other words, even though Wuxia was loved and supported by many people in the East Sea, he had not established a kingdom of his own, so the power of faith he had could not be transformed into the aura of the human emperor. If he wanted to obtain the aura of the human emperor, he must first set up a banner and announce to the world that he had established a kingdom. The strongest effect of the aura of the human emperor was to protect the mind and the body. With the aura of the human emperor strong enough to protect the body from all evils and magic, even all kinds of knives, spears, swords, and halberds could not hurt those who had the aura of the human emperor. Take the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and the Yen Emperor Shennong for example. Although they had immeasurable virtue, the aura of the human emperor in their bodies was also extraordinary. It had truly reached the level where they were immune to all magic and attacks from immortals and Buddhas. Even their fleshly bodies were protected by the boundless aura of the human emperor, which made them almost immortal. Their cultivation might not be very strong, but they were immortal just by standing there. If they really fought with them, even existences of the Tao integration stage would have a headache. Moreover, with the protection of the aura of the human emperor, even mighty figures of the Tao integration stage would not dare to hurt him easily. Otherwise, they would definitely suffer the backlash of the heavenly Tao, which could kill them. Even mighty figures of the Tao integration stage would be reduced to ashes if they triggered the ultimate punishment of the heavenly Tao. The aura of the purple flood dragon gradually disintegrated under Wuxia's analysis. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly. His divine sense was immersed in the vast world inside his body. From today on, I will establish a kingdom as the human emperor, and the name of the kingdom will be Yan Huang. All of you are my people. A mighty voice spread through the void inside his body. Countless descendants derived from the people that Wuxia had brought out of the mortal world all knelt on the ground in worship. A huge purple aura suddenly took shape inside Wuxia's body. Chapter 962. After comprehending the secret of the Emperor Aura, Wuxia had established a neutral kingdom in the world inside him. Since he rescued all the people of that planet from the mortal world, it had only been a few years in the outside world. But because Wuxia had repeatedly opened Dark Ean's celestial tower to help others cultivate, he had spent tens of thousands of years in it. With the reproductive ability of human beings, the people of that planet in his world had given birth to more than trillions of children and grandchildren over the past tens of thousands of years. A kingdom was founded with trillions of people, and Wuxia was the only god the people of that kingdom believed in. The power of faith of trillions of people gathered in an instant and merged with the enormous virtues stored in Wuxia's body, transforming into a huge purple flood dragon that flew and coiled inside him. The Emperor Aura quickly devoured the Emperor Aura Wuxia had plundered from the Emperor of Nuyu, and in the blink of an eye, the two merged into one. Wuxia felt full of energy as a strange power, which was completely different from his physical strength, magic power, and divine sense, filled him. It gave Wuxia the illusion that he could overturn rivers and seas without using any divine abilities or mystic arts, and that he could hold the sun and the moon in his hands as toys. The purple dragon Emperor Aura gradually rose into Wuxia's spiritual ocean and swirled around Wuxia's divine soul. As the Emperor Aura and the aura of the divine soul communicated with each other, Wuxia's divine soul was gradually condensing and compressing. At Wuxia's realm, it was extremely difficult for him to improve his divine soul by even a little bit. But nourished by the Emperor Aura, the power of faith of billions of people was constantly purified and poured into his divine soul, causing it to soar at a rate that even Wuxia himself could feel. Wuxia even felt that he could exert an amazing combat prowess, just by relying on the power of his divine soul's divine sense. Only then did he realize that there was a reason why those truly lofty emperors could subdue billions of people with just a wave of their hands. The mortal emperors in the mortal world could rely on their insignificant Renhuang Qi to have such power, let alone the benefits that Wu Qi had obtained from plundering to use Renhuang Qi. Narrowing his eyes, Jihao released his divine sense forward. Without using any magic power or divine ability, the dense spiritual energy within a radius of 1,000 miles in front of him suddenly collapsed inward. In the blink of an eye, it was compressed into a sesame grain-sized, sparkling and translucent spiritual energy crystal. Wu Qi smiled, opened his mouth, and swallowed the spiritual Qi crystal into his stomach, quickly digesting it and transforming it into his own primordial violet Qi. After roughly measuring the power of his divine sense, he found that he could easily suppress an early-stage Dao-breaking expert, and he could silently injure others. Compared to close combat or killing with flying swords and magic treasures, he was countless times more stealthy. Laughing loudly, Wu Qi's eyes emitted a cold light as he slowly stood up. As soon as he stood up, the courtiers and immortal priests in the nearby East Sea City, who were cultivating in the spirit cave, immediately noticed that Wu Qi was very different from before. In the past, Wu Qi was as ethereal as an immortal, but now the aura around Wu Qi was as vast and boundless as the ocean, as solid and steady as a mountain, and when he walked, he was like a dragon or a tiger. As soon as he moved, the crowd felt a sharp pain in their eyes, and they dared not to look at Wu Qi directly. Shocked, the crowd fell to their knees almost instinctively, and no one dared to raise their heads. Even the courtiers of the 6 states in the spirit cave did the same. They felt that the aura around Wu Qi was thousands of times stronger than that of their emperors. How could they resist it? Wu Qi's power fell like a mountain, and they had no choice but to kneel and worship him devoutly. In the face of the majestic Wu Qi, everyone knelt on the ground, trembling with fear. Their minds were blank, as if all their thoughts were under Wu Qi's control, and no one dared to have any thoughts before he spoke. After briefly testing the suppressive effect of the emperor aura on the people around him, Wu Qi nodded with satisfaction. It was only the emperor aura condensed by the billions of people in his body, and yet it had such an effect. When the time came and the entire East Sea was merged with Yanhuang, Wu Qi would receive more than 100 times the power of faith from the people. At that time, all he had to do was to find a way to get some more virtues. At the thought of the power of virtues, Wu Qi's body suddenly froze. According to the information sent back by the secret agents, outer heavenly realms were constantly returning to Pangu continent and merging with it. And whenever an outer heavenly realm was reunited with Pangu continent, there would be an immeasurable amount of virtues sent down by the heavenly Tao, which would be absorbed by the heavenly lords using special containers. Could it be that the Celestial Court and Buddhist League had the same idea as Wu Qi? If they wanted to surpass Du in terms of emperor aura, they would have to use a huge amount of virtues to fuse with the faith of the people to produce an enormous amount of emperor aura. After all, Du had established his kingdom on Pangu continent for countless years, and he had accumulated an enormous amount of emperor aura. Even though the Celestial Court and Buddhist League had split it up, the remaining half of the emperor aura was still not something ordinary people could compare with. Even if Zhang Tingyun could unify all the mortal kingdoms in outer heavenly realms, he would not be able to gain the allegiance of all the people in a short time, and he would not be able to accumulate enough emperor aura to fight against Du. Therefore, he could only use other means to help Zhang Tingyun accumulate emperor aura. At the thought of this, Wu Qi could not help but smile. How could there be such an easy thing? You want Zhang Tingyun to become the human emperor smoothly, but Wu Qi can't let you do that. After pondering for a brief moment, Wu Qi left the spirit cave in a haste. He left behind a few words, telling everyone in the spirit cave to work hard in their cultivation, and improve their cultivation base as soon as possible. Wu Qi did not know that just because of his words, the people in the spirit cave had started to cultivate with all their might, as if they had gone mad. They did not hesitate to take the risk of suffering from cultivation deviation, and did not hesitate to consume their own blood essence in order to improve themselves. In just a few months in the outside world, tens of thousands of years had passed in the spirit cave. The cultivation bases of the civil and military officials, immortals, and itinerant cultivators of the East Sea had improved a lot, and their progress had shocked even Wuxia. Putting aside how hard these people were cultivating, Wuxia left the spirit cave in a hurry and summoned a blood-draining celestial fiend to disguise as himself to guard the East Sea, while his true self transformed into a gust of wind and flew toward the northern frontier of Du. Far away in the northern frontier of Du, several armies of the Ling dynasty were sweeping across mortal kingdoms from outer heavenly realms, killing their emperors and plundering their emperor aura. With his current cultivation base, without attracting any attention, it only took him a few days to come to the place where the flames of war were raging in the northern region. Outside a large city, Wuxia saw an army of the Ling dynasty launching a fierce attack on the city. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers besieged the city, and there were only tens of thousands of soldiers defending the city. They were barely fighting against the army of the Ling dynasty with the help of the city's defensive barriers and formation maps. This was the capital city of a small kingdom called Han Kingdom. The kingdom was not strong, but its monarch seemed to be very kind to its people. Therefore, although most of its territory had fallen and the city was surrounded by more than 10 times the number of soldiers, the soldiers in the city were still fighting the powerful enemy with their lives. And the monarch of Han Kingdom, who was guarding the city, had the emperor aura in his body was not strong, but it was extremely condensed and lively, just like a living dragon. Nodding to himself, Wuxia exercised an escape art and quietly slipped into the city, transforming into a gust of wind and blowing past the monarch of the Han Kingdom. Without alerting anyone, Wuxia stole the emperor aura in his body and integrated it into his own. Then he left easily. No one knew that he had gained something. A few days later, the capital city of Han Kingdom was breached. The general of the Ling dynasty triumphantly sent the monarch of Han Kingdom back to the city of Wanling of the Ling dynasty. Zhang Tingyun killed the monarch of Han Kingdom with one punch amidst the congratulations of many courtiers. But he was shocked to find that there was not a trace of emperor aura in his body. He was simply a big empty dumpling with no internal substance at all. Zhang Tingyun was stunned, Liu Bang was stunned, Liu Buwei was stunned, and all the courtiers of the Ling dynasty were speechless for a long time. After a long pause, Zhang Tingyun said in a self-deprecating manner, "I think the monarch of Han Kingdom is a fatuous monarch. His people are disloyal to him, so the emperor aura in his body is in a mess." All the courtiers of the Ling dynasty agreed with Zhang Tingyun, but they all had an ominous feeling in their hearts. Even if the people were disloyal and the emperor aura was in a mess, there should not be no trace of emperor aura left, right? After stealing the emperor aura from the monarch of Han Kingdom, Wuxia swept across the northern region of Du. Along the way, none of the emperors of the mortal kingdoms in outer heavenly realms escaped from his hands. These mortal kingdoms only occupied an area of tens of thousands of miles on Pangu continent, and Wuxia could travel through tens of thousands of such small kingdoms in a day and a night. Like a bee in the blossoming season, he had worked hard to extract all the emperor aura from these emperors' bodies, leaving an empty body waiting for the generals of Ling dynasty to take over. After months of hard work, Wuxia finally stole all the emperor aura from the emperors of all the mortal kingdoms in the northern region. After that, he immediately rushed to the southern region of Du. After several months of hard work, he had extracted the emperor aura from all the mortal kingdoms in the southern region of Du. As long as they were near the direction of the Ling dynasty, he left quite a few mortal kingdoms in the direction of Great Wu. After that, Wuxia continued his journey to the western region of Du. But in the western region, he found some signs that something was not right. After hesitating for a long time, he simply exercised a mystic art and soared into the sky, stealing the emperor aura of all the emperors of the human race in outer heavenly realms that were heading towards Pangu continent, but were still some distance away and had not had time to reintegrate with Pangu continent. There were more than 10 million outer heavenly realms heading towards Pangu continent. Even with all his might, it took Wuxia several years to travel through all these heavenly realms and extract all the emperor aura from them. Over the years, the Ling dynasty had wiped out thousands of mortal kingdoms, and every day, one or several mortal kingdoms were wiped out by the armies of the Ling dynasty. But to Zhang Tingyun's disappointment, He found that the emperor aura in the emperors of the destroyed mortal kingdoms was so thin that even if he absorbed all the emperor aura in them, it would not be of any help to him. It was as if Zhang Tingyun had sent an army to slay a dragon. But the prey he brought back was a little loach. The contrast was so great that he could not bear it. But he did not know that if it had not been for the passing of so many years, and if these emperors had not accumulated a little emperor aura in their bodies, he would not even be able to get the little loach. When Wuxia returned to the East Sea from outer heavenly realms, Zhang Tingyun and Lu Bang finally could not hold back their doubts, and told the celestial court about the strange incident. Shocked and furious, the celestial court immediately sent a capable celestial lord to investigate the matter. Chapter 963. In the meeting hall of the Ling dynasty, an executioner clad in a red outfit beheaded the emperor of a small kingdom. Yi Qi, who was secretly sent to the Ling dynasty by the celestial court, and also served the Big Dipper emperor of the celestial court, frowned and drew out a 3 feet long, thumb-thin, purple stream of emperor's aura from the emperor's body. The emperor's aura was extremely loose, and could not take the shape of a dragon at all. It was coiling around Yi Qi's fingertip like a mudfish. This was not the emperor's aura that should belong to an emperor, who controlled tens of thousands of miles of land and ruled hundreds of millions of people. Perhaps, in the ancient times, the power of faith gathered by the leaders of human clans, which had no more than hundreds of thousands of people, was 10 times stronger than this emperor's aura. Grinning, celestial lord Yi Qi crushed the sovereign aura with one hand. With a dark face, Zhang Tingyun sat on the throne and said in a deep voice, "Look, celestial lord. In the past 3 years, countless kingdoms of the Ling dynasty have been destroyed, and all their emperors have become prisoners. But the strongest emperor's aura I've obtained from them is no more than this. 3 years ago, some of them even had no emperor's aura in their bodies, and were simply empty shells. Celestial Lord Yi Qi, this is not good for the great plan of the celestial court. Please find out the truth as soon as possible," said Lu Bang with a dark voice. Celestial Lord Yi Qi circled around the dozen emperors who were kneeling in the great hall, shivering in fear. With a wave of his sleeve, a dozen heads flew up, and their bloody souls were sucked away by a strange power in the void. Then he raised his hand, and a dozen streams of emperor power flew out. Sure enough, they were as weak as mudfish. Weighing the emperor's aura in his hand, Yi Qi narrowed his eyes and cast a spell with a mystic magic. Immediately, the emperor's aura in his hand drifted away, turning into fluorescent light spots and hovering around his palm. These emperor's auras were newly born in the past 3 years, which is why they are so weak. Frowning, celestial lord Yi Qi explained to Zhang Tingyun and Lu Bang what was wrong with the emperor aura. Logically speaking, the royal aura of a country should be passed down from generation to generation. The previous monarch would pass it on to the next monarch, and from generation to generation. As the population and territory expanded, the royal aura would only accumulate and gradually grow stronger. The sovereign qi in the bodies of these monarchs had clearly been sucked dry by someone 3 years ago. The sovereign qi in their bodies had only been regenerated in the past 3 years, which was why they were so weak. Zhang Tingyun was so angry that his whole body trembled. He shouted sternly, "Who dares to oppose me?" Celestial Lord Yi Qi sneered with a gloomy face. "I'm afraid they are not going against you, your majesty, but against the celestial court." Standing next to Zhang Tingyun, Lu Buwei said in a cold voice, "Some almighty expert must have sucked away the emperor's aura of these monarchs, so that his majesty could not gather enough emperor's aura to fight against you, thus interfering with his majesty's plan to ascend to the throne of the human emperor. Those courtiers of Yu could not have done such a thing. Their brains would not have reacted so quickly." Lu Bang nodded thoughtfully and said, "Yes, those civil and military officials of Great Yu are only good at killing to their heart's content. They can't do such insidious things like pulling out the firewood from under the cauldron. Hee, who else but us, the celestial court, knows the importance of the emperor's aura? If His Majesty's emperor's aura cannot suppress the emperor's aura of Diyu's Emperor Haozuan, then the Ling dynasty will certainly suffer a loss in the war against Diyu." The people in the great hall exchanged glances, then turned to the west at the same time. Lu Buwei, who already held great power in the Ling dynasty and was in charge of financial affairs and intelligence work, said in a cold voice, "A few days ago, I received a report that a kingdom called Tranquility has suddenly emerged in the western region of Diyu. It is a very powerful kingdom, and it has wiped out tens of thousands of kingdoms in the western region. It has gathered an army and is fighting the Yuxiong army, which is under the command of Gao, King Weishan. It is said that Yuxiong army has suffered a few losses." Celestial Lord Ichi's face turned extremely unsightly. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked around the many corpses in the great hall, then said with a cold grin, "The Shizo dynasty. In the plans of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League, there is no such kingdom. All the kingdoms in outer heavenly realms have been thoroughly investigated before they came to Pangu continent. I remember that the name Shizo dynasty is not in the official documents sent to the 6 great celestial emperors." Zhang Tingyun said with a gloomy face, "In that case, someone has deceived the 6 great celestial emperors. Who has the means to do so?" Looking at the corpses on the ground, Lu Bang said, "Not only does someone have the means to deceive the 6 great celestial emperors, but they can also extract the emperor aura from these emperors in advance, so that His Majesty cannot fuse with their emperor aura and enhance the fortune of Ling dynasty. It seems that such a dirty trick can only be." Everyone looked up at the same time at the far west of the sky, where Mount Gradrakuta was located. Celestial Lord Ichi's face had turned as pale as a dead man's. "That seems to be the case," he said coolly. "It is understandable that the man who has conferred the title of God on behalf of the heaven and the future human emperor is such an important position. I suppose they have also pushed out their agents to compete for these 2 positions. What a cunning and scheming man." After pondering for a moment, Celestial Lord Ichi looked at Zhang Tingyun with a frown and said, "In that case, His Majesty is not safe either." Zhang Tingyun flew into a rage. He slapped the armrest of his throne and bellowed, "Don't tell me they dare to kill me?" Celestial Lord Ichi said in a deep voice, "They dare not, but so what if they steal the Emperor Aura from His Majesty? May I ask Your Majesty, how much of the power of this supreme treasure of primordial can you unleash? If you can unleash more than 30% of its power, there will be very few people in the universe who can hurt His Majesty. If you can't unleash more than 30% of its power, I'm afraid there will be no less than 800 people under their command who can quietly take away His Majesty's Emperor Aura." Celestial Lord Ichi said bluntly to Zhang Tingyun, "Without the Emperor Aura that you have painstakingly accumulated through tens of thousands of reincarnations, what use is His Majesty to the Celestial Court?" Zhang Tingyun's face turned pale. He shuddered uncontrollably, as if he had thought of something terrible. He stared at Celestial Lord Ichi and said with a wry smile, "Please tell me, Celestial Lord, how can I avoid this disaster? If I am successful in the future, Tung Yun will remember this favor." Celestial Lord Ichi smiled with satisfaction, then nodded and said, "Good. His Majesty holds the natal star spirit tablet of the Great Heavenly Cycle, which allows him to mobilize the natal star force of 84,000 celestial lords in the Great Heavenly Cycle. He does not use it to hurt the enemy, but only fuses his divine soul with the Renhuang Qi. With the protection of the natal star power of 84,000 celestial lords, who can do anything to His Majesty, unless those patriarchs personally attack?" Zhang Tingyun slapped his forehead as if he was suddenly enlightened. He smiled and said, "I've been muddle-headed. Well, I'll protect myself first, and then I'll make other plans. Since they have taken away the Emperor Aura of these emperors in advance, it makes things easier for us. When we break into the capital of the Shizo dynasty and kill the Emperor of the Shizo dynasty, his Emperor Aura will belong to me. Isn't that great?" In the East Sea City, Wuxia had worked hard for more than 3 years to steal all the Emperor Aura of the emperors of those small human kingdoms in the universe. The Emperor Aura of countless emperors had gathered in Wuxia, and his Emperor Aura was already about 70% of the Emperor Aura of Diyu at its peak. Emperor Haozuan had just led an army to slaughter Nuyu and reunite Diyu. But the Emperor Aura in the Emperor's body had been stolen by Wuxia. Emperor Haozuan's Emperor Aura was only half of what it was at its peak, and it would take him a long time to win over the hearts of the people in order to regain its former glory. Therefore, Wuqi was now the man with the strongest emperor aura in the universe. When he returned to the East Sea City, the morale of the soldiers in the East Sea City had risen significantly for no reason. Even the yield of crops and the number of babies born in the East Sea City had increased significantly in the next few months. On top of that, almost all the newborns were suitable to practice the body tempering technique of the human race, and on average, 1 in 1,000 was suitable to practice the art of sacrificial magic. As the saying goes, a great man and a great place prosper. The enormous emperor aura that Wuqi had gathered had indeed brought such a mysterious change to the East Sea. After not seeing each other for years, Wuqi did not explain what he had done. Instead, he immediately pulled Princess Zhongli's arm and made love to her. They spent all day together, and for the time being, they were not in the mood to pay attention to the war between the East Sea and the Ling dynasty. Over the past 3 years, the East Sea and the Ling dynasty had their share of victories and defeats, and no one could occupy an absolute advantage. Today, I took a few cities from you, and tomorrow you took back a few more. It was nothing more than a stalemate. Over the past 3 years, hundreds of thousands of soldiers on both sides had died in the war, and that was the only loss. But as both sides occupied vast territories and had countless people, the loss of hundreds of thousands of soldiers was not even a drop in the bucket, so no one took it seriously. Lying on a small island by the East Sea, in a pavilion specially built for Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu, Wuqi leaned against Princess Zhonglu, while Princess Zhonglu fed Wuqi all kinds of fresh wild food lazily. The moon was shining high in the sky, and the stars were shining brightly. The sea breeze rolled up the waves and lapped on the small island, and the sound of the waves was lulling. Having just spent a long time with Princess Zhonglu, Wuqi also yawned lazily, and then the stars in the sky dimmed. Wuqi was startled, and he walked out of the pavilion with Princess Zhonglu to look up at the sky. The light of the stars in the sky quickly disappeared, and with their powerful divine senses, they could feel that the 84,000 immemorial stars in the sky were brewing a terrifying force. Not long after, 84,000 extremely fine silver lights shot down from the sky, falling toward the capital of the Ling dynasty in the distance. While Wuqi did not know what was happening in the Ling dynasty, the soul-locking seal on his back, which was sealed by Giguzi with the celestial star armor, suddenly activated, and a sharp pain went straight to his brain. Wuqi let out a muffled groan, and his vision went black. For the past few years, Wuqi had been running around to steal the Emperor Qi, but he did not neglect the deadly soul-locking seal on his back. After a few years of painstaking work, he had worn off 90% of the soul-locking seal. Just as he was about to exhaust all of them, the star force suddenly gathered in the city of myriad spirits, and none of it fell on him. Therefore, the heavenly star escape art crumbled with a boom, and the soul-locking seal was unleashed with full force. Not only the pain, but the worst thing was that the ripple of the soul-locking seal had spread out. Wuqi had no idea where the fiend was just now, but as soon as the seal moved, she suddenly appeared before him. Yo, I've been looking for you for years, but I finally found you. The devil grinned and laughed shrilly at Wuqi. Wuqi paused for a second, then quickly sent a message to Princess Zhonglu with his divine sense, then turned around, transformed into a streak of light, and fled. The devil giggled shrilly. Without even taking a glance at Princess Zhonglu, she mustered up her strength and chased after Wuqi. Chapter 964. A long beam of light swept across the sky above the capital of the Ling dynasty, bringing with it a terrible gust of wind. When Wuqi flew across the city, no one in the city realized what had happened. 7 of the supreme towers stationed in the sky above the city were shattered by Wuqi. Countless broken bricks and tiles poured down from the sky, causing the houses in the city to collapse, and the dead and wounded were everywhere. Zhang Tingyun, who was silently circulating his cultivation technique to draw the power of the stars to stabilize his emperor aura and divine soul, could not move at all. Meanwhile, Celestial Lord Ichi soared into the sky furiously and snapped, "Who dares to come here and make trouble?" Before his voice could fade away, the fiend had already flown past Celestial Lord Ichi like a ghost, casually slapping his forehead with a claw and smashing his head like a rotten watermelon. Only then did the civil officials, generals, oracles, and immortals of the Ling dynasty react. They leaped into the sky and rushed towards the fiend. But a seductive moan rang out, and suddenly, over 1,000 balls of flame burst into flames high up in the sky. The fiend's power was boundless. With just a soft moan, the hearts of over 1,000 high-ranking officials of the Ling dynasty were set ablaze. The invisible flame rushed into their heads from the top of their heads and burned all the way to their Yongquan acupoints. Their fleshly bodies and magic power were set ablaze at the same time, emitting different colored flames that burned happily in the sky. Before long, the 1,000 balls of flame fell heavily to the ground and exploded like meteors. The fire splashed tens of miles away, burning all the beautiful and luxurious palaces and pavilions nearby, and burning all the soldiers of the Ling dynasty who had heard the news into ashes. With just a soft moan, the Ling dynasty had lost over 1,000 top-notch experts, and nearly 100,000 ordinary soldiers had suffered the disaster. Giggling, the fiend cried out in a low voice, "How dare you attack me? I'll remember you." Snorting coldly, the fiend turned into a cloud of smoke and chased after Wuxia, who had already fled far away. As she chased after Wuxia, she laughed and said in a low voice, "Why are you running? No matter where you run, I'll chase after you. You'll have to die. No one who has been targeted by the ancestor has ever escaped. Where can you run to?" Without looking back, Wuxia rushed forward. He purposely flew past those big cities and military towns of the Ling dynasty. Every time he flew past them, he would fly right above their city walls. Just as Wuxia had expected, the soldiers of the Ling dynasty were very elite. When Wuxia flew past them, they hurriedly flew up into the sky to stop Wuxia. However, they always bumped into the demon lord behind him. The demon lord was almost at the peak of the Tao-breaking realm. She could kill anyone who dared to stand in her way with a single claw. Along the way, Wuxia had passed tens of thousands of cities and military towns of the Ling dynasty. Tens of millions of soldiers and commanders had been killed by the angry demon lord. Wuxia had kept his promise with Zhang Tingyun. He did not kill those soldiers of the Ling dynasty, but the people killed by the demon lord could not be blamed on Wuxia. In order to give the Ling dynasty the most painful blow, Wuxia flew eastward at a high speed. When he was out of the Ling dynasty's territory, he flashed across the void and came directly behind the demon lord, then turned around and flew westward. He found another route and circled the Ling dynasty's territory as fast as he could. The demon lord wanted to kill Wuxia to vent her anger. She did not realize that she had been used as a butcher's knife by Wuxia. She followed closely behind Wuxia, her eyes shining brightly. A strange ripping sound rang out as Wuxia flew over the city of Wanling again. This time, dozens of supreme oracles struck at the same time, unleashing a very powerful magic to attack Wuxia. But Wuxia was flying too fast. The magic barely brushed past Wuqi's body and did not touch him. Instead, the demon lord was hit by the magic and was slapped away by a huge statue of a ghost god, thousands of miles tall and shrouded in ghost fire. With dozens of supreme oracles joining hands, the power of this spell was terrifying. Although the demon lord's cultivation base and magic power were at the level of the peak level of the Tao-breaking realm, her body was not very strong, especially when she was single-minded in chasing after Wuxia. How could she have thought that such a melodramatic thing would happen? The devil god's palm slapped on her, nearly blowing her fair and beautiful body to pieces. The pain made fiend flames burst out of her 7 orifices, and drops of purple blood flew out of her mouth. Flustered and exasperated, the demon lord locked onto Wuxia with a threat of divine will. Then, she threw her head back and let out a shrill howl into the sky as she thrust both hands down. After a series of explosions, tens of thousands of defensive mechanisms in the city were destroyed by the demon lord. The entire city collapsed, and the whole mountain was forcibly pushed 30,000 miles into the ground. Underground fire boiled, and lava and poisonous fire shot up into the sky, burning countless officials and people of the Ling dynasty in the city. The almighty experts of the Ling dynasty were so frightened that they hurriedly put out the fire and tried their best to save the people in the city. The demon lord screamed shrilly, and the colorful fiend energy around her transformed into a 9-headed, 18-armed, gigantic devil god, who plunged down from the sky and crushed the 1,000-mile-tall devil god unleashed by dozens of supreme oracles. The devil god waved her 18 arms at the same time, and the 30-odd supreme oracles of the Ling dynasty in the sky howled miserably as they were smashed like eggs. Laughing coldly, the demon lord glared at the city of Wanling, which had been pushed deep into the ground. Based on her nature, she should have rushed down and killed all the living beings in the city. But a great sense of danger lingered around her. After a moment of hesitation, she gave up attacking the city and continued to chase after Wuxia. She did not have that sense of danger when she was chasing after Wuxia, but she always felt that once she attacked the city of Wanling, it would be the time of her death. The premonition, which pointed directly at the origin of her divine soul, made her very uneasy. As the saying goes, pick the weakest persimmon to pinch. Almost instinctively, she continued to chase after Wuxia. But at that moment Wuxia had taken another big circle, laughing all the way to the east. The demon lord was so angry that her eyes turned green. Her Dharma body split apart and dissipated into a 5-colored mist. Her flying speed was at least 10 times faster than before, and with a few flashes, she had come behind Wuxia. She sneered, then reached out a fair little hand from the mist, pressing it towards Wuqia's back and said, "Dai Daoist, your blood essence is very pure, and I like it very much." The palm pressed down, but the demon lord missed. Just as the demon lord's body turned into a 5-colored mist, Wuqia's body suddenly disintegrated into a mass of green light that shot forward like a drizzle. Wuqia's flying speed had also increased by more than 10 times, and in the blink of an eye, he had widened the distance between him and the demon lord. After a moment of shock, the demon lord gave a furious roar. Her body stretched out into a very fine beam of 5-colored light, shooting across the void and chasing after Wuxia. While chasing and fleeing, Wuxia quickly crossed the primitive landmass that was rapidly forming in the east of Pangu continent, crossed the boundary between the front and the back of Pangu continent, and headed in the direction of the origin tree of fire. The demon lord had no idea what Wuxia was doing on the back of Pangu continent, nor did she know what terrible existences were hiding on the back of Pangu continent. She was still chasing after Wuxia like a fool. After fleeing for a long time on the back of Pangu continent, a raging flame rose into the sky in front of them, and an unusually tall crimson divine tree could be vaguely seen. Wuqia's body swayed as an illusion shot forward, while Wuxia himself cried out, "Great horns! Help me deal with this damned little girl behind me." Great Horn's wild laughter rang out like a thunderclap, shaking Wuqia's ears and making him feel a sharp pain. A beam of flame came shooting over as Great Horns happily punched the head of Wuqia's illusion, shattering it to pieces. Great Horns was taken aback, but Wuxia had already flashed to his side, cupped his fist at him, and said with a smile, "I've won this time. Don't give me another punch later." Great Horns blinked desperately. He still could not figure out how he, a Dao-fusing expert, could be dazzled by the illusion conjured by Wuxia, who was just a Dao-breaking expert. But no matter how hard he thought, he could not figure out what was going on. He threw his head back and roared angrily, venting all his anger on the demon lord who was chasing after Wuxia. The demon lord was clever. As soon as Great Horn's laughter rang out, she turned and fled like a cat who had seen a tiger, running for her life as fast as she could. She sensed a terrible aura from Great Horns that was enough to wipe her out completely. It was the aura of the supreme existence of this world. In the face of a Dao-fusing expert, experts of Dao-breaking, Dao-reasoning, and other realms were just targets that could be easily killed. But there was no way she could escape. A fiery light flashed around Great Horns, and in the blink of an eye, he was already standing in front of the demon lord and slapping her in the face. "That old monster wants Lao Tzu to help him get rid of you. And you still dare to run? Why don't you try running again? Lao Tzu will break your legs." Wuxia could not measure the strength of Great Horn's slap. In any case, Wuxia himself had not reached the Dao-fusing realm, so he could not know some of the mysteries of the realm. But the effect of the slap was visible to the naked eye. The demon lord, who had transformed into a multicolored haze, was slapped back into her human form, and half of her face was nearly blown away. Her eyes rolled up as she spun tens of thousands of times in midair, then fell in front of Wuxia in a very sorry state. The demon lord was very fierce. Even after being slapped by great horns, she let out a furious roar as if she had gone mad. Shrouded in colorful light, the beautiful demon god with 9 heads and 18 arms, who stood tens of thousands of miles tall, plunged straight down from the sky. She was adorned with pearls and inlaid with countless beautiful jade and jewels. Her whole body was glinting with an intoxicating light. The gigantic statue of celestial fiend fell to the ground with a groan, and when Wuxia heard the groan, he could not help but feel his body go weak. But Great Horns was an insensitive man. With a flash of flame, Great Horns rushed in front of the demon god and kicked her in the lower abdomen, sending her flying up into the air and smashing her head on the divine tree of fire. Squatting on the branch, the lion man could not hold back any longer. Howling and waving his shield and sword, he swooped down from the sky and began to smash and slash at the demon god like a madman. The divine tree sprayed out a great sheet of flame and wrapped around the falling demon god, preventing it from falling any further. Great Horns rushed to the side of the fiend, who was desperately fighting against the lion's storm-like attacks, and scolded him in a low voice. Then he held the fiend's head with one hand and smashed him with the other like a pile driver. Tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of punches were thrown at her in every second, and the frequency of the blows made Wuqi's heart skip a beat. He did not have such a speed with his current strength. The demon god held miserably, and 5 colored clouds kept bursting out of her body. That was her natal energy essence being constantly scattered. Hypocritically, Wuxia came to Great Horns' side and said to the demon god with a smile, "Listen to me, and you won't have to be beaten." With great difficulty, the demon god turned her eyes to look at Wuxia, then suddenly burst into tears. Wuxia was stunned, and Great Horns was so frightened that he immediately withdrew his punches and took dozens of steps back with his hands clasped behind his back. Chapter 965. Lao Tzu has never hit a woman in his life. TSK, this has nothing to do with me. Great Horns waved his hand desperately, trying to dissociate himself from the crying she-fiend. Wuxia could not help but roll his eyes. How could a mighty Dao-fusing expert lie with his eyes open? I don't think you have such a bad character, do you? The lion man, who had been hacking at the she-fiend with his sword and smashing her with his heavy shield, had long since put away his sword and shield. Instead, he was lying on the tree root and snoring as if everything had nothing to do with him. When Great Horn saw his disciple's behavior, he simply walked to the edge of the lava and jumped into the boundless ocean, disappearing in the blink of an eye. What a naughty pair of master and disciple! Looking at the she-fiend lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face, Wuxia touched his nose, feeling a headache coming on. After pondering for a moment, Wuxia walked up to her and said in a deep voice, "Treat your wounds first. We'll talk later." The she-fiend's eyes were wide open, filled with misty illusions, and she kicked her legs wildly. She screamed, "Just let me die. When have I, your ancestor, ever suffered like this? Who in the chaotic world dares to provoke me? Why am I being bullied and abused like this when I come here?" Gritting her teeth, she glared at Wuxia. Suddenly, her straight, snow-white legs sprang up and gave Wuxia a hard kick in the groin. "What's going on here?" she snapped. "That horn guy. Why does his every move carry the power of the heavenly Tao?" Wuxia let the she-fiend's leg hit his groin. A loud boom rang out, and the she-fiend howled miserably as her calf was broken into 4 or 5 pieces by Wuqi's counterforce. Her leg bones were deformed, and large purple bruises immediately appeared under her fair skin. The she-devil stared at Wuxia as if she had seen a ghost. She subconsciously used her hands to push herself back a few steps. The little she-fiend's devil cultivation technique was extremely powerful, and her magic power and cultivation base were extremely high. She had reached the peak of the Tao-breaking realm. However, she was new to Pangu world, and it seemed that she hadn't figured out the difference between the Tao-breaking stage and the Tao-fusing stage. As for Bodhisattva Kitagarbha, and the other bodhisattvas and arhats of the Netherworld branch of the Buddhist League, they seemed to have intentionally not told her that there was a level in Pangu world called the Tao-fusing realm. Given her peak Tao-breaking cultivation base, the The chaos fiend gods of the chaotic world who were born at the same time as Wuqi were far inferior to her. Wuqi remembered that when Yuanling was just born from Yuanling's nether realm in his previous life, his cultivation base was not even at the level of 9th tier of primordial immortal. It was only after a very long period of struggling in the chaotic world that he finally attained the overall strength of Tao-breaking realm. Therefore, the little she-fiend was telling the truth when she said that no one in the chaotic world dared to provoke her with her peak-level Tao-breaking cultivation base. Powerful creatures were born in the chaotic world all the time, but very few of them could reach the realm of primordial as soon as they were born, let alone a freak who could reach the realm of Tao-breaking. In the chaotic world, a peak-level Tao-breaking expert could do whatever he wanted as long as he did not run into those old monsters who had lived for a long time. But in Pengu world, a Tao-fusing expert who had fused with the heavenly Tao could mobilize the power of the entire world to attack the enemy. The little she-fiend was just an outsider, and she was already suppressed by the heavenly Tao of Pengu world. So when she faced Great Horns, who was a Tao-fusing expert, she was beaten badly and had no power to fight back. Just now, she was trying to sneak attack Wuqi, but she had neglected the fact that she was practicing divine abilities and mystic arts. Although her devil cultivation base was amazing, her fleshly body was hard to explain. The weakest part of Wuqi's body was tens of thousands of times stronger than the hardest bone in her body. It was like using a diamond drill to hit tofu. Naturally, the tofu would be smashed into pieces. Wuqi tilted his head and looked at the little she-devil. She also widened her misty eyes and stared at Wuqi. After being beaten by Great Horns and his master, the little she-fiend was severely wounded. Now, she only had less than 10% of her peak overall strength, which was at most equal to Wuqi's current magic power. Since this was Great Horns' lair, the place was filled with his terrible aura, so the she-fiend dared not to move recklessly. Meanwhile, Wuqi was thinking about how to deal with this fiend who had a formidable cultivation base, but was extremely fierce and vengeful. After pondering for a long time, Wuqi took a step forward and leaned forward to ask, "How many years has it been since you were born from primal chaos?" Blinking her eyes, the little she-fiend moved her fingers and calculated for a while, then said in a mumbling voice, "Enin tide has been thrice." As soon as she said that, the lion man's tail stood erect with fear, and Great Horns, who had plunged into the sea of lava, poked half of his body out of it. Both of them stared at the little she-fiend as if they were looking at a ghost. The so-called Enin tide was the name given by the living beings born in the primal chaos to a unique energy tide in the chaotic world. No one knew where it came from or where it went. In short, it would blow across the whole chaotic world once every period. The tide of Bai, and contained an extremely powerful force of biological breeding. For a long time, some living beings in chaos believed that the tide of Bai, and was the origin of life in the entire chaos world. It was the Bai that catalyzed all kinds of magical creatures in chaos, and gave birth to incomparably powerful chaos fiend gods. There was no sun in the chaotic world, and there was no distinction between time and space. Therefore, the living beings in the chaotic world all used the Enin tide as the unit of time. The little she-fiend had only gone through 3 Enin tides since she was born, which meant that her age was only 3 periods and a little over 300,000 years. In just 3 periods, she had attained the peak level Tao-breaking cultivation base and magic power in such a short period of time. The innate talent of this little she-fiend was simply sensational. Great Horns and the Lion Man were so frightened that their hair stood on end. What is a genius? She is a genius. Like Yuanling in Wuqi's previous life, Great Horns was born with the cultivation base of a peak-level gold immortal. He struggled to survive in the chaotic world for countless years, and went through at least hundreds of millions of Enin tides, from which he absorbed endless biological energy. That was how he got his mighty cultivation base in the future. In the end, it was Great Saint Pengu who created the world and created the Pengu world with his mighty power, which allowed Great Horns and the other 30-odd chaotic fiend gods to fuse their divine souls with the heavenly Tao and reach the immortal realm of Tao fusing. If this little she-fiend could reach the peak-level Tao-breaking realm in just 3 periods, how strong would she become in the future? Great Horns smacked his lips and tilted his head to look at her. After a long while he heaved a long sigh and said, "Old monster, keep a close eye on this little girl. We can't let her fall into those people's hands, even if we have to destroy her. Otherwise, we'll all be in trouble." After pondering for a moment, Wuxia walked up to the she-fiend and put his hands on her shoulders. The little she-fiend shuddered, and almost instinctively, she raised her leg and was about to kick his groin. But then, she thought of the cruel treatment her other leg had just received. She shuddered and hastily pulled back her leg. Beams of bright light rushed out of Wuqi's palm, nourishing the little she-fiend's body and gradually healing her injuries. It was a wisp of innate life force Wuqi had extracted from countless innate divine trees in Yuanling's nether realm, which had a very strong nourishing and life force recovery effect for any living creature. Her injuries seemed serious, but they were all external wounds. With Wuqi's help, she had fully recovered in just 4 hours. After releasing her, Wuqi pointed at his back and asked, "Can you help me remove the soul-locking seal now?" She twitched her mouth and sneered, "I never let go of anyone I want to kill." Before her voice had died away, Wuqi kicked her in the face with his big foot. Terrible physical strength exploded out, and stretched her neck by almost 3 inches. Amidst the sound of bones breaking, Wuqi kept punching and kicking her, covering her with cuts and bruises that were several times more serious than what Great Horns had done to her just now. With both hands clutching her neck, Wuqi said ferociously, "What about now? Will the soul-locking seal still work after I kill you?" An unstoppable killing intent gushed out of Wuqi's body. He really wanted to kill this little she-fiend. If it couldn't be subdued, then it was fine to kill it. There were all kinds of creatures in the chaos, and among them, there were countless strange and perverse characters. They were terrifying existences that instinctively killed and devoured. This was especially true for creatures like demons from the outer realms. You could only use violence and terror to frighten them. Warmth and kindness were a joke in front of them. The little she-fiend tilted her head and stared at Wuqi as she said seriously, "I'll die with you." As soon as she said that, Wuqi twisted her neck and sent the Yuanling true flame into her 7 orifices, wrapping up the core of her divine soul with a scorching flame that could destroy everything. "If that's the case, I'll have to destroy you," Wuqi said in a deep voice. "I have nothing to say to fiends from outer domains like you. Those tyrannical living beings in the primal chaos, even if they had a one-track mind, could negotiate with them. Only some supreme-grade fiends from outer domains were fearless of death, and they did not even have the concept of life and death. The only meaning of their existence was to devour and destroy everything. There was really nothing to say when dealing with fiends from outer domains like them." The little she-fiend shuddered all over. She bared her teeth and wanted to say a few harsh words, but Wuqi gave her a series of slaps that made her lose her sense of direction. The Yuanling true flame wrapped up the core of her divine soul, and slowly began to burn and melt the foundation of her existence. She did not take it seriously at first, but when she found that the Yuanling true flame had burned the core of her divine soul to the point that it was about to melt and collapse, she finally let out a hoarse cry. "Spare me. I'll listen to you." She cried out hoarsely. According to the law of the Fiend League, the stronger one wins. "You are stronger than me, so I'll listen to you." Great Horn stroked his chin and said to Wuqi, "I don't think this girl's words are reliable, are they?" Grinning coldly, Wuqi pulled out the she-fiend's divine soul core, and constructed an extremely complicated formation in it with the Yuanling true flame. After working for 7 days and 7 nights, the formation was finally completed. Wuqi shoved the divine soul core back into the she-fiend's spiritual ocean, then grabbed her and fled into the distance. As he fled, he smiled at Great Horns and said, "Thank you for your help this time, Great Horns. I'll bring you some good wine next time." Great Horns smacked his lips and murmured in a low voice, "This little girl is just 1 step away from the realm of Dao fusing. Do you really dare to keep her by your side?" Shaking his head, he dived into the sea of lava, too lazy to pay attention to Wuqi's nonsense. Chapter 966. This little she-fiend was one of the shapeless heavenly fiends, and she looked very young and immature. Looking at the beautiful and adorable little she-fiend, Wuqi suddenly could not help but feel a little mischievous. He squatted down, pinched one side of her face, and said with a smile, "A man and a woman alone in a dark cave. Aren't you afraid that I'll do something to you?" The little she-fiend rolled her eyes at Wuxia, then turned her head and said with a cold snort, "My clan has never revealed our names to outsiders." The little she-devil sneered and said arrogantly, "We, the shapeless heavenly devils, are born with the knowledge of all kinds of divine abilities. If our real name is known by others, they will seize a part of our origin fiendish power, and we will be secretly controlled by them. You asked me for my name, so why would I tell you?" It was like a kindergarten student trying to verify Goldbach's conjecture. The little she-devil carefully used her divine sense to touch the restriction array, trying to crack it. As a result, she kept vomiting blood along the way, almost dying from the backlash of the restriction array. All the fiend's blood essence and divine soul were controlled by it. As the saying went, pull one hair, and the whole body will be affected. She barely touched it, and her energy and blood would be shaken immediately. She was lucky that she had not been killed by it. With one hand pressed between her eyebrows and the other on her abdomen, Wuqi's eyes shone with an evil light. The first thread of innate thievery energy was unleashed, and the primal purple energy was transformed into thievery energy. It silently penetrated into her body, fusing into her limbs, bones, and every cell. Wuqi smiled at her and said, "Your cultivation base is too high, and your overall strength is too strong. I don't dare to keep you by my side like this. As for your cultivation base, I won't hold back." Wuqi opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything for a long while. The little she-devil was indeed a type of shapeless heavenly devil from the outer realms. Their devil techniques were closer to spiritual attacks, and they were proficient in all kinds of invisible restrictive spells. They had the ability to transform into light and invisible chi, and they could injure their enemies invisibly. They were best at devouring people's blood essence and divine chi, and they were the most vicious, greedy, and vengeful among all the visible and invisible devils in the outer realms. As Wuqi ran, the she-devil gritted her teeth and narrowed her eyes in a daze. She was trying her best to break the restrictive formation that Wuqi had set up in the core of her soul. If she could break the formation, with her cultivation, she would definitely be able to teach Wuqi a lesson. But how could this little she-devil compare to Wuqi's formation Dao cultivation? The various devil techniques and divine abilities of this devil were innate abilities, and she was only relying on her innate talent to run amok. Speaking of formations, alchemy, artifact refinement, divination, and other miscellaneous arts, she hadn't even learned them yet. It was no wonder why she kept chasing after Wuqi. Any unlucky fellow who was targeted by an invisible devil from the outer realms would suffer the same treatment as Wuqi. The invisible devils would pester them for countless reincarnations, and they would only stop when they turned their enemies into ashes. There were often eminent monks in the Buddhist League who had offended an invisible devil from the outer realms in their previous lives, and after that, they would be pestered for thousands of reincarnations. Even if they eventually attained the enlightenment of Buddha, some of them would still be secretly controlled by the invisible heavenly devils, eventually falling into chi deviation and dying. The little she-devil was furious. Her eyes shone with a ferocious gleam that bordered on madness. She threw her head back and let out a long howl. The pitifully small armor on her body suddenly dispersed, revealing her exquisite and flawless body. A boundless enchanting aura spread out from her body and enveloped Wuqi tightly. "How could I lose to you?" she cried out hoarsely. "How could I lose to you? It's either you or me today." After running for a long time with her in his hand, Wuqi finally returned to the front of Penghu continent. Then he found a mountain shrouded in countless thunderclouds on the newborn landmass, where lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and chaotic energy swirled. He found a small cave in it, dragged the little she-devil into it, and threw her to the ground. The little she-devil let out a miserable howl. It was the first time her body was broken, and the pain made her see stars and her body twitch. She bit hard on Wuqi's shoulder and growled vaguely, "I'm going to turn you into a mummy today." The little she-fiend gave Wuqi a surprised look, then suddenly burst out laughing. Twisting her body slightly, she said proudly, "As long as you don't hit me, who will be afraid of you? Hee, who in the chaotic world dares to bully me? A member of the shapeless heavenly fiend clan. With that kind of means?" However, As Wuxia was wearing down the little she-devil's cultivation base, he did not really kill her. Therefore, the virtues he received were very little. If Wuxia could kill the little she-devil, the great virtues he would receive would be no less than what he had received when he killed Torch Dragon. The little she-devil gave a reluctant roar. The supreme artifact of Primal. How can you be so shameless? Her long hair was disheveled, revealing large patches of fair skin that could not be covered by the small armor. Her petite body looked like that of a 13 or 14-year-old girl. She did not look like a fiend who had been born for more than 300,000 years. After staring at each other for a while, Wuxia suddenly laughed and said, "Interesting. Well, let's give it a try." Wuqi's body trembled violently. His spirit, energy, and soul were rapidly drained by the little she-devil. But it was obvious that the speed at which she drained Wuqi's spirit was far slower than Wuqi's. No matter how she cursed and gnashed her teeth, the speed at which Wuqi stole her spirit was 10 times faster. Wuqi was horrified. His spirit essence was drained out of his body, and his cultivation base dropped from the peak stage of Tao breaking to the second tier. Only now did he realize how terrifying this little she-devil was. The shapeless heavenly fiends from the outer domain were indeed the most ferocious creatures in the world. Time passed day by day. In a long and deep cave, the little she-devil lay weakly on the ground, staring at Wuqi. Her misty and seductive eyes were fixed on Wuqi, and her 2 little canine teeth were faintly visible, as if she wanted to bite a few pieces of Wuqi's flesh off. She shrieked and activated the innate divine ability of the shapeless heavenly fiend. She did not care that the core of her soul was still under Wuqi's control. Instead, she activated her own divine ability to crazily plunder the spirit essence from Wuqi's body. Wuqi was stunned, and couldn't help but shudder. He had learned from his previous experience that he should not use those kinds of erotic methods to torture this fiend. The formless devils usually like to suck people's essence chi, and the formless heavenly devil was one of them. Not to mention doing that kind of shady business with her. Just a slight touch from her would cause the blood essence and divine chi of outsiders to be completely drained. Buzz. A circle of multicolored light and chaos power streams clashed against each other, spreading out in all directions and instantly filling up the entire cave. A tremendous power surged out from the little she-devil's body, and was quickly injected into Wuqi's body, refined into his own arcane energy using the heaven-refining grand art. The core of the little she-devil's soul was opened wide in front of Wuqi, and without any secrets, Wuqi easily plundered all the secret arts and skills of the shapeless heavenly fiend in her memory. Endless mysterious power surged out from her and merged with Wuqi's soul. At the same time, a soul-devouring, bone-piercing pleasure rushed into Wuqi's psyche ocean from the lower part of his body, nearly disintegrating his soul. He screamed in shock and activated the seals in the little she-devil's soul core recklessly, almost knocking her out. Then he circulated the great thief chi to its maximum, and the heaven-refining cauldron flew out from his forehead, enveloping the 2 of them in it. He then used the Yuanling True Flame, the various innate divine flames, and the innate wildfire to refine them. After all, the heavenly Tao was the heavenly Tao of Pangu world, and the little she-devil was a demon that invaded from the outer realms. She posed a great threat to all the native living beings in the Pangu world. By killing her, Wuqi had removed a great threat to the heavenly Tao. Thus, the amount of karma points he earned from killing her was not small at all. This little she-devil was really blessed by the heavens. Only God knew how she was born in the chaotic world. She was only born for 3 periods, but her body already contained an essence no weaker than a Tao-fusing level cultivator. What a monster! The little she-devil's skills, mystic arts, talents, and abilities were quickly absorbed by Wuqi, and the little she-devil's arcane energy and cultivation base plummeted. The tremendous energy was injected into Wuqi's body, refined into primordial purple chi and stored in every corner of his body. Purple clouds rolled and rolled over from all directions in the cave, while wisps of virtuous aura kept injecting into Wuqi's body. He was using some means to harm the little fiend. The heavenly Tao sensed it, and immediately bestowed the virtuous aura upon him, rewarding him with the merit of eradicating the fiends from outer heavenly realms. Wuqi stared at the little she-devil's alluring body and suddenly he asked with a deep voice, What's your name? Wuxi's waist tightened, and the little she-devil's long and slender legs wrapped around his waist. The protective robe that Wuxi had refined for himself shattered, and the little she-devil fell down with a ferocious look on her face. Instantly, the two of them became one. The roars soon disappeared, leaving only a series of bone-softening moans that sounded like the meowing of a cat. Wuxi felt his lower body tighten. The little she-devil was like a black hole, sucking Wuxi's essence at a speed 10,000 times faster than before. Wuxi was delighted to see this, so he activated the thievery energy even faster, frantically plundering the little she-devil's essence and turning it into his own. The little she-devil's eyes widened in horror. She had always been the one plundering the essence of others, and no one had ever taken anything from her. Over the past 3 periods, she had killed countless powerful creatures in the chaotic world in the outer domain. When had she ever suffered such a loss? In just a few breaths of time, Wuxi's cultivation base had reached the 3rd level of the Tao-breaking realm. The little she-fiend's overall strength was only at the peak of the Tao-breaking realm, but the energy essence in her body was extremely terrifying. He was shocked to find that her innate talent was definitely at the Tao-fusing realm. If she was given some time to fuse with the laws of the heavenly Tao of this world, she would definitely be able to step into the Tao-fusing realm smoothly, and even become one of the strongest experts in the realm. The little she-devil roared in exasperation. The two of them devoured each other's essence, and more than a month passed in the blink of an eye. Wuxi's cultivation base gradually improved from the 3rd level of the Tao-breaking realm to the 2nd level, and from the 2nd level to the 1st level. Another month passed. After 3 months of devouring each other's essence, Wuxi's cultivation base steadily improved to the peak of the Tao-breaking realm, and 20% of the she-devil's natal essence had been plundered by Wuxi. Chapter 967. Inside the cave, the colorful light faded. Wuxi and the little she-devil lay on the ground, entangled like 2 octopuses. Both of them were soaked in sweat, but Wuxi's face was rosy and energetic, while the little she-devil's face was gray, as if she had just recovered from a serious illness. They had been fighting for over a month, devouring each other's life force. At last, Wuxi had devoured over 70% of the she-devil's life force, reaching the peak level of Tao breaking. By chance, his soul would merge with the great Tao of heaven, and as long as Panga world existed, Wuxi would never die again. The little she-devil, who had her teeth clenched tightly on Wuxi's shoulder, snorted angrily. Her cultivation had fallen from the peak level of Tao breaking to the 6th level. It was just that her innate talent and foundation were too strong. Although her magic power and cultivation base had declined so much, given some time, Wuxi estimated that she would be able to return to the overall strength of a 2nd-tier Tao-breaking expert. If she was given a great number of powerful immortals and Buddhas to kill and plunder their life force, she might be able to return to her peak in 3 to 5 months. Recalling the inexhaustible life force that surged into his body when he had sex with her, even Wuxi was shocked. She was a freak. He had never heard of any chaotic creature who could produce such an enormous life force. What troubled Wuxi the most was that the little she-fiend's cultivation base was stronger than his in the beginning. When both of them were devouring each other's energy essence, their natal energy essence flowed back and forth in their bodies and fused with each other, matching the essence of yin and yang of the Taiji. Now, just like Princess Zhonglu, the little she-fiend had given birth to a nascent embryo in her body. On top of that, the aura emanating from this nascent embryo was extremely bizarre. So strong and bizarre that even Wuxi was struck dumb by it. At the moment, Wuxi was a chaotic being, but his body was that of a human, while the little she-devil was an invisible sky devil from outer space, a 1st-generation devil who was qualified to be the evil ancestor. What kind of child could they give birth to? In any case, when he sensed the aura emanating from the body of the little she-fiend, which belonged to Wuxi and her son, his hair stood up one after another, and he had a shivering feeling as if he had encountered his natural enemy. If the embryo hadn't been giving off the aura of intimacy to Wuxi and the little she-devil, Wuxi might have done it already. The little she-fiend tried to tear the skin and flesh in her mouth with all her might. She found that Wuxi's skin and flesh were many times tougher than the skin of an old cow, and with the strength of her teeth, there was no way she could tear through his skin and flesh. Only then did she loosen her mouth resentfully, rubbing her shiny silver teeth on Wuqi's chest. "You're hurting me." The little she-devil stared fixedly at Wuqi, gently twisting her slender waist in a graceful manner. Wuqi was enraged by the little she-devil's actions. Outer space devils, especially the invisible sky devils, were best at seducing people's inner organs and arousing all kinds of instinctive desires. As the first-generation devil who was qualified to be the evil ancestor, the little she-devil's innate ability was even more terrifying. With Wuqi's current cultivation base, there was no way he could resist her terrifying charm. Immediately, a series of strange noises could be heard coming from the cave. Wuqi's muffled groans and the little she-devil's moans, which sounded like she was singing, echoed through the cave. Once again, an enormous energy fluctuation spread out in all directions. After another 3 days and 3 nights, the clouds finally dispersed. Wuqi dared not to waste any more time with the little she-devil. He hastily got up, condensed a clump of water and washed his body, then found a new robe and put it on. The little she-fiend rose to her feet lazily, fetched a clump of water, and washed her body and long hair. After that, naked, she wrapped her arms around Wuqi's waist and murmured weakly, "My real name is Mo Wuqi? Ming. Huan. Xia, you can call me Mo." Wuqi looked at the little she-devil with surprise, frowned and said, "Can you tell me your real name now?" The little she-devil gently twisted her waist and hummed a tune. At the same time she giggled and said, "Is it very strange? This is the iron law of my clan. No matter what means you used to do what you did to me just now, I am pregnant with your child. You are my devil lord, and I am your devil concubine." Counting her fingers, Xia giggled and said, "It doesn't matter if you used violence or other means. In any case, this matter has been settled. From now on, you and I will live together. If you leave me, you will die, and if I leave you, I will also die." Before Wuqi could come back to his senses, a plume of black smoke suddenly emerged from the place where their bodies touched. The thick black smoke formed an extremely strange and abstruse spell above their heads, then divided into 2 balls and disappeared into the space between their eyebrows. Wuqi faintly felt that there was something extra in his body. It seemed that he and Xia had indeed formed a strange bond of life and death. After a moment of silence, Wuqi patted Xia's pert buttocks and took out a green Taoist robe. With a wave of his hand, the Taoist robe shrunk by more than half and handed it to Xia. Xia hummed a little tune as she casually put the Taoist robe on. She squinted her eyes and looked at Wuqi with admiration, saying, "My shapeless heavenly devil clan is best at seizing the essence of others, but the devil lord was actually able to seize more than 70% of Xia's essence. This kind of demonic technique is worthy of being Xia's devil lord. You don't even know the name of the devil lord, but you have conceived a devil fetus with him. This is really unreasonable." The little fiend was like a pampered kitten, twisting and turning on Wuqi's body like a huge caterpillar. Wuqi was enraged by her. He fiercely slapped her buttocks a dozen times, then shouted coldly, "My name in this life is Wuqi. In my previous life, I was also one of the chaos fiend gods, named Yuan Ling. Now I am Du, king of East Sea, so you can just call me prince in front of others." Xia's eyes went wide in surprise. She carefully looked at Wuqi from head to toe, then squinted her eyes and said with a smile, "So the devil lord is born in the same family as Xia. In that case, the devil lord is indeed a good match for Xia. We are really lucky. Xia has just broken into this world, and she has already met the devil lord. When our devil fetus is conceived, the shapeless heavenly devils of Xia's clan will be able to flourish and flourish." The word flourish and flourish gave Wuqi a bad feeling. Holding Xia in his arms, he walked out of the cave and asked, "How long will it take for our child to be conceived? You have a sister, Jizi Xuan, and she and I have a child, but it will take 3 eons for the child to be born." 3 eons? Xia said indifferently. The child of Xia and the devil lord doesn't have to go through so much trouble. If it takes so long for the child to be born, how could the shapeless heavenly devils possibly shake the entire chaos? Counting with her fingers, Wuxia nodded seriously and said, "About 12 periods. The Devil Lord's energy essence is very strong, and of a very high quality. Altogether, the children Wuxia and the Devil Lord have conceived are 360,000. When they are born, the Devil Lord will need to find a suitable partner for them, so that the Wuxia clan can flourish and flourish." 360,000 children in one child? Wuqi was so frightened that his fine hair stood straight up, and he nearly fell to the ground. Trembling, he looked at Wuxia and thought, "What is this? Could the first child of me and Wuxia be able to build an army?" The shapeless heavenly devils were indeed a strange species, and could not be compared with the divine immortals and devils of Pengu world. The journey was silent, except for a few foolish immortals who tried to rob Wuqi, who were drained by Wuxia to replenish herself. Wuqi brought Wuxia back to the East Sea with a pale face. He was almost driven insane by Wuxia's words. 360,000 children. How could Wuxia's little belly give birth to so many children? Could it be that there was a hidden space in her belly as well? Once they returned to the territory of the East Sea, Princess Zhonglu and a large group of East Sea warriors had already come to greet them. 2 months ago, the Ling dynasty launched an unprecedentedly fierce attack on the East Sea. A large number of immortals appeared in the army of the Ling dynasty, and even some armies of the Ling dynasty had 70% immortals and 30% human soldiers. The army of the East Sea was caught unprepared, and had been forced back over 20,000 miles on the entire front line. They had lost thousands of cities and over 10,000 military towns, and millions of soldiers had been killed. It was a great loss. Princess Zhonglu led the army of the East Sea to the front line to supervise the battle, and to provide support to the army of the East Sea, which had been routed everywhere. Sensing that Wu Qi had brought the little she-devil back to the East Sea, she hurriedly came to greet them. The little she-devil looked greedily at the generals and soldiers of the East Sea. After calculating with her fingers for a moment, she laughed and said, "Your Highness, there are over 10 million cultivators and ants within 1 million miles of here. Can Wuxia eat them all?" A chill ran down everyone's spine. Huang Liang, who was the closest to Wu Qi, felt his body go limp, and he nearly fell from the clouds. The people of the East Sea looked at Wuxia in horror, like a group of rabbits who had seen a falcon soaring in the sky. It was the instinctive fear of weak creatures encountering their natural enemy. Wuxia looked at the soldiers of the East Sea with bright eyes, then licked her lips with her colorful tongue. She could not help but want to devour all these people of the East Sea. Wu Qi patted on Wuxia's head. Suddenly he felt a severe pain in his head. He suddenly had a strange feeling that the East Sea was like his pig farm, where he raised countless delicious and plump pigs, while Wuxia was a greedy tiger. He had brought a hungry tiger back to his pig farm. Wasn't he just looking for trouble for himself? Vexed, Wu Qi gave the smiling Princess Zhonglu a glance, then pushed Wuxia next to Princess Zhonglu and said with a bitter smile, "Teach her well. She is pregnant with my child as well. From now on, you two will be sisters." Shaking his head, Wu Qi solemnly warned Wuxia not to mess around in the territory of the East Sea. After that, he left behind these annoying things and hurriedly led the soldiers of the East Sea to the front line. Wu Qi was in a bad mood because of what Wuxia said about 360,000 children. He wanted to do something to vent his anger, to teach those bastards of the Ling dynasty a lesson. Princess Zhonglu and the little she-devil, Wuxia, stayed together. Princess Zhonglu brought her back to her temporary headquarters in the front line. 3 days later, Princess Zhonglu and Wuxia appeared together. Wuxia was wearing all kinds of precious pearls and gemstones, which made her look like a doll carved out of fine jade. They called each other sisters. Princess Zhonglu was the elder sister, and the little she-devil was the younger sister. Their relationship was very harmonious. Wu Qi still could not figure out how Princess Zhonglu managed to tame this heartless little she-fiend, who only acted on her instincts. But he did not have time to care about that. The exasperated emperor of the Ling dynasty, Zhang Tingyun, had personally led an army to the East Sea. Chapter 968. If it had not been for the fact that Wuxia had told Wu Qi about her origin, and sworn a life or death pact with Wuqi according to the law of the invisible heavenly devil in the outer realms, and that she had an indescribable feeling for Wuqi. How could Wuqi dare to take Wuxia with him? It would be strange if he did not use all kinds of means to suppress her. In the first 2 days, Wuqi was really afraid that when he woke up one morning, all the humans in the East Sea would be devoured by Wuxia. Wuxia's eyes flickered with a strange light. Without saying a word, Kitagarbha led many bodhisattvas and arhats to form the formation of the 6 paths of the underworld, then charged toward the army of the Ling dynasty, while emitting a great sheet of Buddhist light. The small wheel of the 6 paths of reincarnation spun in the void, and the souls of 30% of the soldiers of the Ling dynasty immediately drifted away and were forcibly sucked into it. Sharp claws tore the bodies of the soldiers of the Ling dynasty, and sharp teeth chewed their internal organs, bones and flesh crazily. Billowing ghost aura frantically devoured the soul aura of these soldiers of the Ling dynasty. Wherever the army of heavenly ghosts passed, not even a blade of grass grew. The army of the Ling dynasty resisted for less than a quarter of an hour before it was wiped out by these heavenly ghosts, who launched a 3-dimensional attack from all directions, from the sky and from the ground. Wuqi took a step forward and stood on the edge of the cliff. The sun shone on Wuqi, gilding Wuqi's black robe. The army of heavenly ghosts knelt on the ground like Chi-Chi and kowtowed to Wuqi. The sound of their kowtows rumbled like thunder, shaking the earth. Because of Wuqi's thunderous means, the battle line in the East Sea had quickly advanced tens of thousands of miles to the east, and Jindong City, which had fallen, was back in the hands of the East Sea. After killing all the soldiers of the Ling dynasty, the heavenly ghosts raised their claws and shouted, "His Majesty, live forever!" As if he thought he could win the battle easily, the general of the Ling dynasty, with a few guards, watched the battle less than 3 miles away from the city wall, laughing and discussing the situation with his confidants. In the camp behind him, the million-strong army of Ling dynasty was leisurely enjoying themselves. Shrill howls could be heard coming from some of the tents. It was the sound of great Yu's women, who had been abducted along the way, being raped by Ling dynasty's soldiers. Nonsense! Wuqi sneered. I swear to heaven that no one above the realm of primordial has joined the battle in the East Sea this time. He reached out and drew a line in the air. A rift tens of thousands of miles long appeared over the army of the Ling dynasty. Endless water from the yellow spring poured down, accompanied by the miserable howls of countless ghosts. The water fell on the soldiers of the Ling dynasty and burned them until white smoke rose from their bodies. Before long, a large number of soldiers of the Ling dynasty were burned to pieces and finally melted into filthy water. The hundreds of soldiers of the East Sea, riddled with wounds, stared blankly at the army of heavenly ghosts. When they saw that the army only ravaged the camp of the Ling dynasty, but did not invade the city they were stationed in, they could not help but raise their weapons and roar at the same time. With the help of the demon Yuan Ling crystal, which was purified from the bodies of the Ling dynasty soldiers Wuqi had slaughtered all the way north, Wuxia's cultivation base had been restored to the peak of the 4th tier of Tao-breaking realm. When it came to rapid cultivation base growth, no creature in the chaotic world could be faster than the invisible heavenly devil when there were enough sacrifices. The city, which measured 3 miles in circumference, together with the nearby villages and towns, had no more than 100,000 people. It was the territory of Diyu province, the most desolate of the neighboring provinces. The population of such a 9th-grade province was no more than 10 million, and the garrison in this city was only about 100 soldiers. A shrill, unpleasant, wild howl rose into the sky, and then a heavenly ghost, whose body was entirely red, rushed out of the chaotic light while shouting the slogan, "My emperor, may live forever." The heavenly ghost, who stood 1,000 feet tall and had countless sharp bone spikes growing all over his body, was clad in an excellent armor forged for him by Wuqi himself, and had a pair of crescent scimitars hanging on his wrists as he charged forward like a madman. Wuqi knew that it was coming. The East Sea had suddenly and easily wiped out hundreds of the Ling dynasty's armies, causing the Ling dynasty to lose countless soldiers, and even killing every last one of them without leaving a single soldier to report back. Therefore, Zhang Tingyun thought that it was an almighty expert of the East Sea like Wuqi who had personally come. Only an almighty expert of the realm of primordial could easily wipe out so many of the Ling dynasty's armies. In a nameless city at the border of the East Sea, Wuqi stood on the edge of a hill outside the city, with Princess Zhonglu on his left, narrowing her eyes and sneering. The little she-fiend, Wuxia, stood on his right, her arms wrapped around Wuqi's, twisting her body like a caterpillar and humming a song indifferently as she watched the bloody scene on the city wall with a smile on her face. Raising his hand, Wuqi released a hazy chaotic light from his palm. Behind him were tens of millions of heavenly ghosts, each shrouded in a towering murderous aura. They surged across the land like a tide and quickly filled the empty space around the city. In an instant, the million-strong army of the Ling dynasty was enveloped by 10 times the number of heavenly ghosts. Laughing strangely, these ferocious heavenly ghosts launched a storm-like attack on the Ling dynasty's army. War, no matter what name was used to start a war, behind the glorious signboard, it was always dark and bloody, filled with the blood and shame of countless innocent people. Wherever the army of the Ling dynasty passed, or the cities of the Ling dynasty captured by the army of the East Sea, all the crimes were the same. This was something that even Wuqi could not control. Therefore, Zhang Tingyun came to reason with Wuqi. According to the agreement between him and Wuqi, once a primordial expert of the East Sea joined the battle, the East Sea would lose the battle. According to the agreement, the entire territory of the East Sea and Princess Zhonglu would be Zhang Tingyun's spoils of war. Kitagarba was even more ferocious. Surrounded by a tumbling Buddhist power, he grabbed a general standing next to Zhang Tingyun, whose cultivation base had reached the level of Hongmeng Pangu heaven, and tore his head off. As soon as he saw Wuqi, Zhang Tingyun snapped from 100 miles away. "King of East Sea, how shameless you are!" Battle cries shook the sky. Led by Kitagarba, Bodhisattvas and Arhats, Kitagarba had regained his Dharmakaya of the netherworld, which was shrouded in dark karma. Like evil ghosts, they slaughtered the army of the Ling dynasty, leaving corpses and rivers of blood everywhere. Nether Yiksha followed closely behind, dealing the most terrifying blow to the army of the Ling dynasty. Wuqi snorted coldly. Just as he was about to unleash the army of heavenly ghosts in his body to fight the Ling dynasty, Wuxia suddenly smiled charmingly. She clapped her hands and said, "Your Highness, this man is so rude. Let me teach him a good lesson." For heavenly ghosts who could travel through the void at will, no defensive mechanism or formation was a problem. They turned the camp of the army of the Ling dynasty into a sieve, and the army of 1,000,000 soldiers turned into ghosts in an instant. With a wave of his hand, a stream of chaotic energy swept across the battlefield, and all the soldiers disappeared into it. Wuqi glanced at the small city that had survived the disaster, then turned into a beam of green light and flew south. Princess Zhonglu and Wuxia followed closely behind Wuqi. Wuxia had a fist-sized blood-colored pearl in her hand, which she held up to Princess Zhonglu. Princess Zhonglu shook her head with a smile, and Wuxia hurriedly swallowed the pearl. As such a small city, it naturally did not have any powerful defensive mechanisms, or anything like that. The garrison of 100 soldiers was 10% of the entire army in the province. Standing sparsely on the city wall, they were howling and fighting the 9,000 soldiers of Ling dynasty who were besieging the city. 7 days ago, Wuqi personally came to the front line to supervise the battle. For 7 days and 7 nights, he had crossed almost the entire East Sea defense line from south to north, destroying nearly 100 legions of the Ling dynasty with millions of soldiers, over 1,000 legions with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and countless legions with tens of thousands of soldiers. The nameless city in front of him was the northernmost, most remote, and weakest city in the East Sea defense line. All the armies of the Ling dynasty south of the city had stopped advancing westward, and were retreating in panic. Amidst the thunderous cheers of the heavenly ghosts, the general of the Ling dynasty, whose cultivation base had reached the peak of the second Pangu heaven, was distracted for a moment. Then the general, who had the same cultivation base as him but was not afraid of death, cut off his head at the cost of one of his arms and one of his thighs. The head of the general of the Ling dynasty flew up into the sky with a blank look on his face, then fell heavily to the ground, and was eaten up by the few soldiers of the heavenly ghosts. An enormous power of faith poured into Wuqi's body, and was gradually absorbed by the enormous Emperor Aura in Wuqi's body. Originally, the Emperor Aura Wuqi obtained when he established a neutral kingdom of Yanhuang in the boundless world inside him was pure purple. But a few days ago, he suddenly had an idea. He named the yellow spring in the heavenly ghoul clan, which was multiplying and nourishing in his body. As a result, his purple Emperor Aura suddenly turned purple-red, mixed with a strong smell of blood. The originally dignified and solemn Emperor Aura turned purple-red, overbearing, dignified, evil, and gloomy. Even Wuqi could not extract the demon Yuanling crystals from the soldiers he had slaughtered without any psychological burden like Wuxia. Only the invisible heavenly devil could do it at will without any psychological burden, and act on instinct. Zhang Tingyun snapped. That's absurd. If that's the case, are the armies of the Ling dynasty nothing? Did you wipe out all the armies in the front line in just 7 days? If you have such a powerful army in the East Sea, why were you beaten back 20,000 miles by the Ling dynasty a few days ago, and lost your city and land? As the terrible water of the Yellow Spring rolled down, Bodhisattva Kitagarbha, and the other bodhisattvas and arhats of the Netherworld branch of the Buddhist League drifted out. The purest energy essence of millions of soldiers of the Ling dynasty, condensed into a mass of energy essence the size of a human head. After being purified by Wuxia with the colorful fiend flame, it turned into the purest demon Yuanling crystal, without any impurities. After swallowing the demon Yuanling crystal, Wuxia's aura suddenly soared. Leading the high-ranking officials of the East Sea to the east gate of Zhendong City, she saw thousands of cloud platforms, each 100 miles in length and width, floating in midair one layer after another around Chi-Chi. On the foremost cloud platform stood a magnificent palace. Surrounded by countless civil and military officials of the Ling dynasty, Zhang Tingyun stood on the high jade steps in front of the palace, looking down in the direction of Zhendong City. Wuqi could not figure out what this thing was called, but the aura it gave him was stronger than the aura of the human emperor, so he did not bother to separate the bloody aura from it. Moreover, the total amount of this aura was several times stronger than the original aura of the human emperor, so he was even more reluctant to separate the bloody aura. After all, the reproduction speed of heavenly ghosts was several times faster than that of humans. Over the years in Wuqi's inner world, both the heavenly ghosts and the human race had been reproducing at full speed. The total population of the heavenly ghosts was more than 30 times that of the human race, and the power of faith they provided to Wuqi was much stronger. Zhang Tingyun was beaten so hard that he felt dizzy and disoriented. Wuqi and his companions returned to the East Sea City. As soon as they sat down, and before they could tell the high-ranking officials of the East Sea about their whereabouts in the past few days, they heard the roars of flood dragons and the deafening sound of drums and horns ringing out from the east. Zhang Tingyun's furious roar shook the walls of Zhendong City. Chapter 969. In the largest parlor of Wanling Palace, on the top of the city of Wanling, which had been uprooted from the ground, a huge vase made of fine jade was smashed to pieces. The 10 feet tall vase was smashed to the ground. The loud noise scared the eunuchs and palace maids inside and outside the parlor out of their wits. They all bowed their heads cautiously and dared not to make a sound. Like a madman, Zhang Tingyun smashed all the precious furnishings in the parlor. Even dozens of jade slips, which contained jade essence paste, and could be used as spirit medicines that could bring the dead back to life, were smashed to the ground by him. Milky white and light green jade essence paste spilled all over the ground. As soon as these precious things came into contact with the air, they quickly froze, and all their energy dissipated, losing all their magical effects. Lu Bang and Lu Buwei were sitting on the left and right of the parlor, looking coldly at the furious Zhang Tingyun. As the candidate chosen by the celestial court to be the next human emperor, Zhang Tingyun, who had always had a smooth life, had never suffered so much. He had brought a large army to the East Sea, but he was defeated by the bodhisattvas and arhats of the nether branch of the Buddhist League, who had suddenly rushed out. First, the water of the Yellow Spring suddenly gushed out. The extremely filthy water tainted 99% of the magical items of the supreme oracles and immortals of the Ling dynasty who were caught off guard, causing them to lose their spirituality. As a result, the overall strength of these supreme oracles and immortals was immediately halved. Then Bodhisattva Kitagarbha led many bodhisattvas and arhats to form the Yellow Spring formation of the 6 paths of reincarnation. With the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, they crazily slaughtered the soldiers of the Ling dynasty, as if they were harvesting leeks. Countless soldiers were crushed by the 6 paths of reincarnation, and could no longer come back to life. In the sea of the Yellow Spring, countless yakshas followed the formation of bodhisattvas and arhats and charged forward, chasing after the army of the Ling dynasty for tens of millions of miles. Zhang Tingyan almost coughed up blood. The water of the Yellow Spring was so filthy that no one in the Ling dynasty could resist it. Everyone twitched weakly like cockroaches sprayed with insecticide. Even Zhang Tingyun, a peak-level primordial expert, was confused by the water of the Yellow Spring, and no one could organize an effective resistance. Hundreds of supreme oracles and generals with cultivation bases as high as Hongming Pangu heaven had fallen at Zhang Tingyun's side. The heavy loss made Zhang Tingyun's heart ache so much that he almost fainted. As for the casualties of the ordinary soldiers, Zhang Tingyun did not want to hear the post-war statistics at all. 3 courtiers who were ordered to report to him the exact number of casualties were killed by him with a thunderbolt in front of all the courtiers. Until now, he still did not know how many soldiers he had lost. But it was conceivable that it was an astronomical figure that would make Zhang Tingyun cough up blood. The blow this time was sudden and devastating. No one had expected that someone would be so crazy as to bring the water of the Yellow Spring from the netherworld to Pangu continent. And with such a huge amount of water, which was several times the capacity of the East Sea, he had destroyed the entire army of the Ling dynasty with the water of the Yellow Spring. Zhang Tingyun was so angry that his internal organs felt like they were on fire. He was so angry that the 3 corpses god jumped up and down, and his eyes were bloodshot. In just one day, he had ordered hundreds of palace maids and eunuchs to be dragged out and beaten to death. Apart from Liu Bang and Liu Buwei, no one dared to show up in front of him, leaving him to vent his boundless anger in the parlor. A crisp sound rang out as the last display in the parlor was smashed by Zhang Tingyun. The broken pieces scattered all over the floor, and Zhang Tingyun's anger seemed to dissipate with them. Almost at the same time as the display was smashed, he returned to his throne with a cold face. As the sky darkened, a few palace maids walked into the parlor, trembling, and replaced the candlesticks with new candlesticks. Inside the candlesticks were candles made of merman's oil. They gave off a faint fragrance that could calm one's mind and calm one's mind. The flame was bright and did not produce any smoke, which made them rarer than any luminous pearls. Wuxia was sitting upright on the heart of a candle. He had transformed into a wisp of flame and was hiding in the flame, looking at Zhang Tingyun and his companions with a smile on his face. In the heart of a candle next to him, Wuxia was twisting her waist and flying around. But with Wuxia's divine ability, Zhang Tingyun and his companions still did not notice that she was making a scene in the candlelight. There was a long silence in the parlor. The 3 of them stared blankly at the broken pieces on the floor for a long time. Finally, Zhang Tingyun said, "It was Bodhisattva Kitagarbha from the nether branch of the Buddhist League who did it. Those people have strange appearances, and are very different from the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the Buddhist League. They can't be impersonated." Liu Bang and Liu Buwei nodded at the same time. "Bodhisattva Kitagarbha," said Liu Bang in a deep voice. "Back then, I was ordered to attend the Golden Basin Orchid Gathering on the Great Vulture Mountain, and I met him among the Buddhist League's Vedanta. That day, he contradicted Lord Buddha, and Lord Buddha could only smile at him. He is one of the trickiest figures in the Buddhist League." With a cold snort, Zhang Tingyun sneered and said, "Do you know why he attacked the army of the Ling dynasty?" "Ha! Why?" Beaming with joy, Wuxia twisted her waist in the candlelight and spun rapidly like a windmill. As she moved, a breeze blew in from outside the parlor, causing the candlelight to flicker and the fragrance in the air to grow stronger. Liu Bang pondered for a long time with a frown, then said hesitantly, "The Celestial Court and the Buddhist League have agreed that after this incident, the Celestial Court will be in charge of the heaven, the human emperor will be in charge of the earth, and the Buddhist League will be in charge of the ghosts. The Buddhist League has sent 108 Buddhas of reincarnation to live in the netherworld, and forcibly take over the control of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Could it be because of this reason? Zhang Tingyun gave Lu Bang an unhappy look and said angrily, "If there is a dispute within the Buddhist League, Bodhisattva Kitagarbha should have attacked the Great Vulture Mountain with the group of nether yakshas. Why did he attack the army of the Ling dynasty? And during the battle, I called him dozens of times and asked him why he attacked the army of the Ling dynasty, but he didn't answer me. Isn't this absurd?" Lu Buwei frowned, his old eyes gleaming. No one knew what he was thinking. Lu Bang also frowned and tilted his head, racking his brains. From time to time, he looked up and exchanged glances with Lu Buwei, but it was obvious that neither of them could come to a conclusion. Looking at this, Wuxia laughed so hard that the corners of his mouth twitched. Xia spun her body more and more complacently, and a colorful light faintly shone out of the candlelight. Wuxia gave her a fierce look, and Xia hurriedly sat down on the candlelight again. But she was still twisting her body restlessly, blinking at Wuxia and making faces at him. Several very thin beams of starlight fell from the sky, and soon 7 or 8 celestial lords in robes and crowns appeared in the parlor with streams of light. Lu Bang hurriedly rose to his feet, cupped his fist, and bowed respectfully to these celestial lords. "Greetings, celestial lords." The celestial lords hurriedly returned the greeting to Lu Bang and said, "You're too kind, King of Han." Zhang Tingyun, who was at the side, also stood up and bowed humbly to the few star lords. Judging from their greetings, these celestial lords were obviously important officials with great power in the celestial court. They were Jimin, Tianshu, Migres, and so on. Wuxia looked at them curiously, not knowing why they had come to the Ling dynasty in such a hurry. Zhang Tingyun calmly summoned eunuchs and palace maids to clean up the mess in the parlor, put in new furnishings, and moved a few chairs for the celestial lords to sit down. Jimin smiled and clapped his hands. A beam of starlight fell from the sky and enveloped the entire parlor. The other celestial lords also attacked at the same time. Colorful lights of various colors swirled rapidly in the room, then compressed into countless runes the size of green beans and branded on every brick, tile, and pillar in the parlor. Wuxia and Xia smiled at each other. This was a brilliant method. If someone else had used an escape technique to hide here, they would have been cleared out by them. But how could it be so easy to deal with 2 freaks like Wuxia and Xia? After sealing the entire parlor with a restrictive spell, Jimin snorted coldly and said in a low voice with a hint of killing intent, "Your Majesties already know what happened here. Ziwei Lingying, the great celestial emperor, has sent a letter of inquiry to the Great Vulture Mountain about the nether branch of the Buddhist League attacking the army of the Ling dynasty, but Lord Buddha, Amitabha, said that the nether branch of the Buddhist League has never obeyed Lord Buddha's orders, so there is nothing the Buddhist League can do about it." Zhang Tingyun was so angry that the veins between his eyebrows bulged. "There is nothing the Buddhist League can do?" he shouted in a low voice. "Don't tell me they didn't connive it on purpose?" Celestial Lord Migres said coolly, "Also according to the spies the celestial court planted in the Buddhist League, the master of the nether branch of the Buddhist League, Bodhisattva Kitagarbha, who was the Lord Buddha of the Buddhist League 100 generations ago, has also gone through tens of thousands of reincarnations, and is now the emperor of the Shizo dynasty in the western region of Diyu." With a crack, Zhang Tingyun crushed the teacup in his palm. Lu Bang and Lu Buwei looked at each other in horror. Could it be that the Buddhist League has done something else besides cooperating with the celestial court? Cried Lu Bang. If they can't gather the imperial aura of all the human kingdoms in the outer heavenly realms, how can they compete with Diyu? Wuqi's eyes went wide as he gave Xia a blank look. How could this little fiend mess up the relationship between the celestial court and the Buddhist League? Was it Wuqi's luck that was too good, or was it the luck of the celestial court and the Buddhist League? This is interesting. Bodhisattva Kitagarbha is now the emperor of the Shizo dynasty, and he is also desperately searching for the aura of the human emperor. Meanwhile, his former disciple, Bodhisattva Kitagarbha, the master of the nether branch of the Buddhist League, had led countless troops and defeated the army of the Ling dynasty. It's impossible for the celestial court and the Buddhist League to not have a grudge against each other. I wonder how the 16 celestial lords should deal with this? Zhang Tingyun crushed the teacup in his palm and asked the most important question. What does Daozu think of this? Celestial Lord Jimin rose to his feet, cupped his fist respectfully, and said, "According to Daozu's decree, we will solve this problem ourselves." Zhang Tingyun and Liu Bang exchanged a glance. "In that case, it seems that the EC can only benefit from this," said Liu Bang with a cold grin. "Send out the army quickly and seize the aura of the human emperor," Zhang Tingyun said through clenched teeth. "And teach the Buddhist League a lesson." Liu Bang and Liu Buwei rose to their feet at the same time and bowed respectfully to Zhang Tingyun. Chapter 970. Without alerting the people in the reception hall, who were discussing how to deal with the Buddhist sects, Wuxia and Wuxia dashed out of the Wanling Palace hand in hand. The two of them changed into the luxurious robes that the people of the Ling dynasty liked the most, and strolled leisurely along the winding mountain road of the Wanling city. From time to time, the soldiers of the Ling dynasty with solemn expressions could be seen walking back and forth on the streets. At the crossroads of the major traffic routes, there would be a general in heavy armor leading a large group of armored soldiers to stand guard. The officials and citizens of the Ling dynasty on the streets were all in a hurry. Some of them even had a panicked look on their faces. They no longer had the arrogant and haughty demeanor they had in the past. Wu Qi held Wuxia's little hand as the two of them admired the luxurious and exquisite buildings of the Wanling city. From time to time, they would enter some shops that had strange items from all over the world. They would casually choose some items that looked exquisite and fun, but were actually useless. This was the first time Wuxia had come to such a place, and it was the first time she had spent money to buy something. Therefore, she was exceptionally excited. She would spend a huge sum of money to buy almost anything that was new and interesting. In Wuxia's words, in the past when she saw something good, she would directly kill it and snatch it. This was the first time she had spent money to buy something. Therefore, it was very fun. However, Wuxia solemnly warned Wu Qi that this kind of prodigal behavior of spending money to buy things could only be used occasionally as a way to relieve boredom. In the future, if he wanted something, it would be better to directly snatch it. The weak were prey to the strong. All the good things in this world should belong to powerful existences like Wuxia and Wu Qi. Wu Qi had no idea what to do with Wuxia's logic. It seemed like he could only slowly instill a normal way of thinking into her in the future. In a short period of time, he would not be able to do anything to her. After strolling for 2 hours, Wuxia was a little impatient. Along the way, countless soldiers of the Ling dynasty looked delicious, but Wu Qi did not allow her to act recklessly. Wu Qi knew that there might be a Daozu from Taoism watching them. Wu Qi could use his own aura to conceal Wuxia's presence, but if Wuxia acted recklessly, she might be discovered by a Daozu, and both of them would be in big trouble. Therefore, after shopping for a while, Wuxia felt bored and wanted Wu Qi to take her back to the front line of the East Sea. Over there, she could also extract enough essence from the dead soldiers to replenish her own consumption, so that she would not have to drool over these soldiers of the Ling dynasty. Wu Qi only smiled mysteriously. He took Wuxia for a while in Wanling City, then abruptly held her hand and walked to a large, luxurious house not far away. When they walked past the gate of the house, Wu Qi gently blew into the gate. A white stream of cold air silently seeped into the gate and froze the house instantly, sealing all flowers, plants, houses, and pavilions in the house in a thin, cyan blue layer of xianbing. Chuckling, Wu Qi held Wuxia's hand and disappeared from the street of Wanling City. When they reappeared, they were already above a towering mountain hundreds of thousands of miles away. With a flick of his finger, a fist-sized clump of xianbing emerged and hovered in midair. Holding Wuxia's hand, Wu Qi plunged into the mountain, leaving behind a thin layer of cold air that looked like mist along the way. About 10 minutes later, dozens of beams of light flew over from the direction of Wanling City at top speed, following the thin layer of cold air left behind by Wu Qi into the mountain. They were a group of over 30 gold immortals, led by Reverend Li Yang, an old acquaintance of Wu Qi's. Just now, Reverend Li Yang was having a long talk with a few fellow Taoists in the backyard of the mansion. Sometimes, they talked about alchemy techniques, sometimes sword techniques, and sometimes they talked about the profound principles of immortality, and sometimes They discussed the mysteries of the universe which they had comprehended. All of them had the cultivation base of gold immortals, and their spirit, energy, and soul had merged into one. Whenever they spoke, golden flowers would fly out of their mouths, accompanied by faint immortal music. A fragrant mist hung in the air, and beautiful heaven immortal maidservants would come and go, serving fine wine, tea, and various spirit fruits. It was indeed a great abode of immortals. When Reverend Liang was talking proudly, he took out the green peak sword technique he had recently comprehended for his fellow Taoists to examine. He activated a 3-feet-long sword beam, and flew up tens of feet into the air, splitting into wisps of sword energy and forming layers upon layers of green mountains in the void, drawing the surrounding earth chi into the mountains. Using the sword beam, he truly simulated the power of countless mountains pressing down on the top of the mountains. Dozens of fellow Taoists applauded and praised at the same time, saying that Reverend Liang's green peak sword technique had reached the acme of perfection, and that it was the best sword technique among all gold immortals. Reverend Liang retracted the sword beam triumphantly, then invited his fellow Taoists to drink to their heart's content and enjoy the endless romantic life of an immortal, as well as the luxurious treatment given to gold immortals by the Ling dynasty. Gradually, these gold immortals began to let loose. Perhaps it was the effect of the alcohol, or because they were fellow Taoists, but Reverend Liang and his fellow Taoists began to discuss the mysteries of the union of dragon and tiger, and the coexistence of yin and yang. Then a Taoist who practiced the art of harvesting put his arms around a few heaven immortal maidservants and exercised his supreme cultivation technique under the comments of his fellow Taoists, performing the mystic art of his sect naked. The heaven immortal maidservants were panting and sweating profusely, making them feel as if their souls had flown out of their bodies. At this critical moment, Wuxia blew a mouthful of cold energy from the Dark Yin Water scripture personally taught by Lady Divine Water of Dark Yin True Water Palace, sealing everything in the mansion in a flash in the Xianbing. Reverend Liang and his companions were not affected, but the few gold immortals who were performing the art of dragon and tiger had their bodies steaming like furnaces. They were tempering the yin and yang energy essence in their bodies, harmonizing the purple mist produced by the dragon and tiger. However, when the cold energy rushed over, it was as if a red-hot charcoal stove was suddenly poured with ice water. They shuddered and nearly had their Tao foundation disintegrated. Miserable howls rang out incessantly as the few Taoists coughed up mouthfuls of blood, which flowed out like a free stream. Reverend Liang and all the gold immortals were horrified. They hastily broke free from the Xianbing, took out life-saving immortal pills, and fed them to their fellow Taoists. But as they were suddenly tricked by Wuxia with the cold energy, their vitality was severely damaged, and their cultivation bases dropped by at least 3 tiers on average. The immortals were furious, and Reverend Liang even identified the source of the cold energy. He immediately concluded that the gold immortals from Dark Yin True Water Palace had come to avenge Lady Dark Gold Water. The hair on the back of his head stood on end. Without hesitation, he gathered all his fellow Taoists and hurriedly followed the trace of aura Wuxia had left behind, chasing in the direction where Wuxia had fled. In desperation, Reverend Liang did not have the time to report the matter to Liu Bang, and he dared not to tell the whole world about it. He knew very well that he had a guilty conscience when it came to Lady Dark Gold Water. If this scandal were to be spread out, Green City, a sect that prided itself on being a righteous sect, might very well eliminate him. Even though he was the lineal grandson of Green City's patriarch, he would not be able to keep his life. Flustered and exasperated, Reverend Liang immediately encouraged his fellow Taoists to follow the aura and hunt down Wuxia, and asked them not to alert anyone else. He promised them that it was just a personal matter, and that as long as they could help him kill the enemy who had plotted against him, he would reward them handsomely. According to Reverend Liang's calculation, the overall strength of Dark Yin Divine Water Palace was just SOSO, and a few of his fellow Taoists had a cultivation base as strong as Lady Divine Water, so there was no need for them to fear the people from Dark Yin Divine Water Palace. Even if Lady Divine Water invited some fellow Taoists with a similar cultivation base to help, Reverend Liang and his gang of scoundrels would be able to deal with them easily, and even if they could not defeat them, they would be able to escape smoothly. Therefore, following the dark Yin aura left behind by Wuqi, Reverend Li Yang gritted his teeth and chased all the way into the mountains. After flying along a winding valley for a while, the valley in front of them suddenly came to an end, leaving behind a steep cliff. Wuqi and Wuxia were standing on the cliff, with Wuxia hugging Wuqi's waist and rubbing her head against Wuqi's chest like a kitten. Reverend Li Yang was taken aback. This was really beyond his expectation. Why didn't he see anyone from Dark Yin Divine Water Palace? Instead, he saw an unfamiliar man and a girl who looked so beautiful and alluring, with a strange and evil charm? In a place where the group of gold immortals could not see, countless Kunwu swords flew silently into the sky, attracting the energy of the surrounding underground energy veins and sealing off the nearby void. The heaven-refining cauldron had shrunk to the size of a palm and was hovering in the middle of the sword formation. With the help of the cauldron, as a supreme artifact of primal, not even the extraordinary artifact crafted by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs could break the formation and bring the souls of Reverend Li Yang and the others away. Reverend Li Yang cupped his fist and bowed to Wuqi cautiously. "Fellow Taoist, may I ask why you have lured us here?" he asked in a deep voice. Wuqi gave Reverend Li Yang a look and asked coolly, "Li Yang of Green City?" Reverend Li Yang nodded and said, "Yes." Wuqi asked again, "Are you now the advisor of King of Han Lu Bang?" "Yes," said Reverend Li Yang proudly. "I'm now serving King of Han in military affairs." Wuqi clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Then, you can die now. Do you still remember Lady Dark Goldwater?" Reverend Li Yang was taken aback. He stared at Wuqi in horror and cried out involuntarily, "Who are you?" Wuqi did not want to waste any more time talking to Reverend Li Yang. With a sway of his body, he transformed into Amitabha's four-faced golden body, which was unique to the Lord Buddha. He reached out his long arm and grabbed at Reverend Li Yang, unleashing an invisible force that crushed his immortal body to pieces. Reverend Li Yang's soul howled and flew up into the sky, but Wuqi grabbed it and crushed it with both hands, leaving only a clump of pure energy essence. When the other gold immortals saw how mighty Wuqi was, they could not help but howl with fear. They dropped to their knees and kowtowed to Wuqi, begging Wuqi to spare them. After all, it was not easy to cultivate one's cultivation base. Which of them did not spend eons of hard work to attain the cultivation base of gold immortals? Wuqi looked at them coldly. With a wave of his hand, a beam of Buddhist light fell on their faces, disintegrating their immortal bodies and crushing their souls. Dozens of energy essences were collected by Wuqi, and he handed them to Wuxia. Wuxia took the energy essence with a big smile on her face, then obediently came to Wuqi's side and put her arms around his. Wuqi retracted his Dharma idol, deliberately leaving some clues behind. After that, he put away the sword formation and left with Wuxia. Several hours later, Lu Bang arrived with a large number of people, only to see bloodstains all over the ground and a trace of faintly discernible Zen power. Chapter 971. In the next 10 days, the Ling dynasty was plagued by troubles. In addition to Reverend Li Yang of Green City, who was in charge of military and political affairs for King of Han Lu Bang, along with dozens of his fellow Taoists, some low-key but important figures in the Ling dynasty were killed in the next few days. Among them were even 3 young star lords who had come down to assist the Ling dynasty. Their heads were taken away in the cave abodes they had built outside the city of Wanling for no reason. On top of that, all of their souls had perished. The extraordinary artifacts crafted by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs to collect souls and prepare them for deification in the future did not work at all. Whoever killed them must have used a supreme artifact of primal to conceal their aura and isolate them from the senses of the artifacts. That was why their souls could be completely destroyed so easily. The Ling dynasty was shaken. In a panic, Zhang Tingyun, Lu Bang, Lu Buwei, and others made a decision. The Ling dynasty's army quickly broke away from the East Sea, switching from an active attack to a passive defense. At the same time, the Ling dynasty quickly expanded its army and marched in both the north and the south, sweeping through all the human kingdoms from outer heavenly realms like a flood monster. The speed at which outer heavenly realms descended on Pangu continent also skyrocketed. The heaven lords and immortal monarchs who presided over the outer heavenly realms spared no expense to drive the huge landmasses towards Pangu continent. It was estimated that in 2 years at most, all the outer heavenly realms would be reunited with Pangu continent, and the enormous virtues would fall into the hands of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. At the same time, the Shizo dynasty in the western region went to war as well. They hung up a no-war sign in front of the Flying Bear army led by Gao, but launched a frenzy of attacks in the northern and southern regions, wiping out one human kingdom after another. According to the analysis of Wuxia and the leaders of the 6 dynasties, both the Ling dynasty and the Shizo dynasty had sensed the treacherous atmosphere between the Celestial Court and Buddhism. Even in private, in a place that Wuxia did not know, the Celestial Court and Buddhism might have had small-scale, low-intensity conflicts, which led to the current situation. Both sides were working hard to gather the human powers in outer heavenly realms, striving to occupy the largest share of the emperor aura of the human race, and then defeat Du and his competitors in one fell swoop. The information sent back by Lao AI also confirmed the speculation of Wuxia and the others. During the time when the Ling dynasty and the Shizo dynasty withdrew their armies and separated themselves from Du, 3 suzerains of the various Buddhist sects had mysteriously disappeared. According to rumors circulating within the Buddhist League, these 3 mighty existences, whose cultivation bases were almost on par with Amitabha, the Lord Buddha, seemed to have fallen suddenly. The status of the suzerains of the heart, mind, and Vajra in the Buddhist League was far higher than that of the Joyful sect, especially the Vajra sect, which was known as the strongest avatar in the Buddhist League. A long time ago, in order to fight for an extraordinary artifact produced by heaven and earth, the suzerain of the Vajra sect had once fought against 12 primordial immortals alone. No matter how they attacked him with flying swords, magical treasures, thunderbolts, flames, and various other immortal magics, his avatar remained unscathed, and he snatched the artifact from the hands of the 12 primordial immortals. After that, it was refined by a reclusive Buddhist League's great benefactor, adding another treasure to the Buddhist League. With the sudden fall of such a formidable figure, there was no need to ask what had happened. While Wuxia secretly lit the fire for both sides, they also began to take action. The only ones who could stop these small frictions were the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. In short, they did not say anything to stop the actions of their disciples and disciples. The situation had become treacherous and unpredictable, but it was a great benefit to Wuxia. Wuxia no longer went out to cause trouble for the Ling dynasty. Instead, he devoted himself to training soldiers in the East Sea, selecting those with outstanding aptitudes from the soldiers, and spending a great deal of resources and energy to train them. If a war were to break out in the future, all the ordinary soldiers would be cannon fodder. A single strike from a primordial immortal could topple heaven and earth, and even ordinary soldiers of gold immortal level could not withstand a single blow. To maintain the initiative in future battles, the East Sea needed more primordial immortals. Wuxia could not help but feel his scalp go numb at the thought of the countless hibernating revered elders in the Temple of Revered Elders of Du, and the overall strength of the disciples that the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs had hidden for so many years. Once the future was in turmoil, there was no way he could escape from the Great War unless he fled into the chaotic world. But how could Wuxia be willing to leave everything he had today and flee into the chaotic world to be a hermit? The Dark Een Celestial Tower was fully unleashed. With Wuqia's current cultivation base at the pinnacle of the Tao-breaking realm, he could accelerate time by 100,000 times. So a year in the outside world was equivalent to 100,000 years of cultivation for the immortals, oracles, and warriors under his command. Apart from the slight shortage of energy in the spirit cave, everything was going smoothly. Half a year passed quickly in the outside world as Wuxia built up his military force like crazy. During these 6 months, there was no war in the East Sea and the Western region. The Ling dynasty, the Shizo dynasty, and those human kingdoms were in full swing, and Great Wu, which was under Wuqia's control, had taken advantage of the situation to annex a great deal of territory and population, snatching many benefits from the mouths of the Ling dynasty and the Shizhou dynasty. The interior of Dayu, on the other hand, was peaceful. Emperor Haozuan was working hard to win over the hearts of the people, especially in the southern region that was once occupied by Nuyu. He was patrolling the southern region day and night with many civil and military officials, working hard to manage the people's livelihood and civil affairs. In Yuxiong Plain, several kings of the council were working hard to train the new army. The treasury of Dayu was fully opened, pouring out endless resources, and cultivating the new army that was absolutely loyal to Emperor Haozuan at an incredible speed. Like the Ling dynasty and the Shizhou dynasty, Emperor Haozuan also had a plan to defeat all his opponents in one fell swoop. Just when everything seemed to be going smoothly, Wuxia, who was teaching the mysteries of the heavenly Tao to his many immortals in the spirit cave, suddenly received an urgent message from the outside. A group of emissaries had arrived from Liangzhu with a special edict from Emperor Haozuan, led by Ji Dai, King Yangshan's eldest son. In the spirit cave, Wuxia sat cross-legged on a cloud of purple mist. Around him were clusters of purple clouds, and countless immortals, demon immortals, and fiend immortals were sitting respectfully on top of them, listening to him explain the mysteries of the heavenly Tao. All the other primordial immortals in Pangu world were very stingy with their understanding of the heavenly Tao, not to mention Wuxia, who was a peak-level expert of the Tao-breaking realm. They would only give a lecture to their personal disciples once or twice in a period, 3 times at most, and each lecture lasted only a few days. It was the first time in history that Wuxia had been teaching and answering the questions of the immortals in the spirit cave for 50,000 years in a row. Even the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs would not let their disciples take advantage of them like this. Without a great contribution, no one could get a word out of their mouths. It was their great fortune to meet Wuxia. Now that Wuxia had received an urgent message from the outside, Wuxia, who was in the middle of teaching the mysteries of the heavenly Tao, paused. All the immortals around him opened their eyes at the same time, took a deep breath, and retracted the purple mist and golden clouds they had released out of their bodies. Then they bowed respectfully and waited for Wuxia's order. After a moment of silence, Wuxia said coolly, "Take good care of what I've taught you." After another pause, Wuxia nodded and said, "From now on, I've made a rule. Heaven immortals are outer sect disciples, gold immortals are inner sect disciples, and when you reach the realm of primordial, you will be my personal disciples. All of you must work hard to improve your cultivation base, and don't tarnish my reputation." Countless immortals rose to their feet, dropped to their knees respectfully, and bowed to Wuxia. Chi answered. These immortals were now the disciples of Underhand sect, including human immortals, demon immortals, fiend immortals, ghost immortals, and many others. Among the human immortals were ordinary humans, longbow people, feathermen, mermen, heaven eye people, and many others. While Wuxia was teaching the great Tao in the spirit cave, a new batch of disciples would be replaced every once in a while. Underhand sect had developed greatly in recent years, and the overall strength of its disciples was far from what it used to be. With a flash, Wuxia left the spirit cave. As soon as he walked out of the backyard of the king of East Sea's mansion, Wuxia suddenly appeared next to Wuxia. With both hands covered in blood, Wuxia wiped the blood off her hands intimately on Wuqi's body and said with a smile, "Bored? How can you be so calm after staying down there for tens of thousands of years? Come with me to hunt whales. I've just killed a great one-horned dragon whale, and got tens of thousands of kilograms of supreme-grade ambergris." Putting his arm around Wuxia's waist, Wuxia smiled and said, "We'll go later, there are guests coming." Interesting." With a flash, Wuxia left with Wuxia in his arms and appeared in the great hall of the king of East Sea's mansion in a flash. As soon as he appeared, he heard Yu Qingqing's voice, which was still fresh in Wuqi's memory. "The king of East Sea is indeed an honorable man. Why hasn't his highness come out to greet you?" Clad in a black palace dress, Princess Zhonglu sat on the throne and looked down at Ji Dai and his men, who were beaming with pride. As for Yu Qingqing, who had his hands clasped behind his back, she did not bother to pay him any attention. Wuqi's silent appearance next to Princess Zhonglu startled Yu Qingqing, Ji Dai, and the others. Two old men with faces as thin as mountain elves hurried forward to protect Yu Qingqing and Ji Dai. Two palm-sized supreme towers emerged over their heads, emanating powerful waves of energy that enveloped the surrounding void. Wuxia squinted at Wu Qi's side and did not say a word. She looked at Ji Dai and his men with great interest, almost instinctively sensing that some interesting prey had appeared. Standing in front of the throne, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Ji Dai and said with a smile, "Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you, King Qingqiu. I was busy with military affairs." "Oh, may I know why King Qingqiu has come from afar?" Ji Dai, a thin man with a sinister and mean face, pursed his lips into a smile and glanced greedily at Princess Zhonglu and Wuxia. He did not say a word, but Yu Qingqing took out a black scroll and said in a deep voice, "It's nothing much. The kings of the council have discussed and decided that the king of East Sea will be promoted to the position of king by Shan, because of his meritorious service and hard work. As for the military, politics and civil affairs of the East Sea, King Qingqiu will be in charge." Wu Qi's heart sank. He was promoted to the position of king by Shan, and then handed over the vast East Sea and its countless people and soldiers to King Qingqiu. Ji Dai? Wasn't that like plucking peaches? Which son of a bitch came up with this idea? Wu Qi's face flickered. Hundreds of longbowmen who were loyal to Wu Qi and stood in the corner of the great hall walked up and surrounded Ji Dai and his men. Chapter 972. The atmosphere in the great hall was strange and deathly silent. Princess Zhonglu stared at Yu Qingqing and his companions with a mocking smile on her face. How could a bunch of fools like them think they could rob her husband of his wealth? As for Wuxia, she was holding Wu Qi's arm with both hands and squinting at Ji Dai and his companions. What a fat sheep. 8 supreme oracles and 8 generals with the cultivation bases of the third Pangu heaven. It must taste good to refine them into fiend blood crystals. Ji Dai failed to notice the sarcasm in Princess Zhongli's eyes, and the dangerous aura of a predator emanating from Wuxia's bones. He sneered as he looked at the longbowmen around him and said, "What is the king of East Sea trying to do? Are you going to attack me?" The burly longbowmen swayed their bodies slightly, their bones creaking. As soon as Wu Qi gave the order, they would pounce on Ji Dai and his companions and tear them to pieces. These longbowmen were the descendants of the longbowmen whom Wu Qi had saved from Myriad Immortals' planet. In their hearts, Wu Qi was the most sacred and inviolable great magus, their only faith. Wu Qi slowly sat down on the throne, crossed his legs, and looked at Ji Dai and his companions. Then he tilted his head and pointed at the scroll in Yu Qingqing's hand. A crisp ripping sound rang out as the supreme towers hovering over the 2 supreme oracles trembled violently. The restrictive spell they had deployed was pierced by Wu Qi's finger, and the scroll in Yu Qingqing's hand flew up and fell into Wu Qi's hand. The 2 old oracles turned pale with fright, and Yu Qingqing let out a strange howl as he staggered back a few steps. Several supreme oracles and generals rushed forward and surrounded Ji Dai and Yu Qingqing, lest Wu Qi suddenly attack them. The power of his finger just now was simply too frightening. He could not believe that the restrictive spell jointly laid out by 2 supreme oracles was pierced through by him. How strong was his cultivation base? Ji Dai's face turned pale as he realized he had underestimated Wu Qi's strength. But a few years ago, Wu Qi had just broken through to the Supreme High Priest's strength. How much could he have improved in just a few years? If he had used the profound heart celestial pagoda to accelerate the flow of time and increase his cultivation, then he should be as old as these old priests around him. High priests of the human race could use all kinds of natural treasures to prolong their lives, but very few treasures could keep them young forever. Judging from the vigorous life force emanating from Wu Qi's body, one could tell that he was still in the prime of his youth, unlike the other supreme oracles who were old and withered. Ignoring the tumbling thoughts in the minds of Ji Dai, Yu Qingqing, and the others, Wu Qi unfolded the scroll and gave it a casual glance. Wu Qi was so angry that he almost burst out laughing. He was so angry that he almost summoned Catfish, Goldhorn, Silverhorn, and all the other cannibals here, so that they could skin Ji Dai and the others alive. On the scroll was a long and smelly official document, listing Wuqi's contributions over the years, praising him for his outstanding contributions, praising him as one of the best pillars in Great Yu, a purple gold beam that supported the sea, a white jade pillar that held up the sky, and a genius who could rule the heaven and earth. At the end of the document, the tone changed, saying that since Wuqi had made such a great contribution, it was time for him to inherit the title of King Baishan, and that Wuqi should have a place among the 18 kings of the council. Therefore, Wuqi was asked to take his family and his trusted guards to Liangzhu, while the affairs of the East Sea, including the war between the East Sea and the Ling dynasty, were all handed over to Ji Dai. The document also mentioned that dozens of palaces and gardens had been prepared for Wuqi near Liangzhu, including fertile land, which was nearly 1,000,000 miles in circumference, as well as all kinds of treasures and toys. Wuqi did not take these things seriously. He patted the scroll in his hand and asked Yu Qingqing with a smile. "There's no need to ask, Master Yu. This is your idea, isn't it? When I've stabilized the East Sea, suppressed the eastern region, stationed the soldiers everywhere, trained the army, and strengthened the Directorate of Celestials in the East Sea, you'll come and pick the fruits, right?" Clearing his throat, Wuqi sighed and said, "What a good plan. TSK, not long ago, the Ling dynasty was still attacking the East Sea, so it was not very peaceful. If King Qingqiu came here to take over the East Sea, he might be killed by a general of the Ling dynasty. Now that the Ling dynasty has sent its army to the southern and northern regions, and there are signs of war with the Shizo dynasty, you're here." Yu Qingqing chuckled, stroked his long beard proudly and said, "What did the king of East Sea say? This is the need of the state." Lightly tapping the throne with his fingers and bowing his head, Wuqi pondered for a long time, then nodded slowly and said, "I've read the document. The strange thing is, I have such a large fief in the East Sea, but when I go to Liangzhu, you'll give me a piece of land with a circumference of 1,000,000 miles? 1,000,000 miles is just the land of a county. Can you really do that? The East Sea belongs to your highness, so naturally, the products will belong to you," Ji Dai said coldly. "The king of East Sea has become King Baishan, making him one of the 18 kings of Diyu's imperial council. What an honorable thing it is. Why do you care so much about it?" "Ha!" Wuqi almost burst out laughing. Was he saying that he cared so much about it? Staring coldly at Ji Dai, Wuqi said in a deep voice, "Even if I become King Baishan and one of the kings of the Imperial Council, what about my duties? Every king of the Imperial Council will be in charge of the state affairs and military affairs of Diyu. Why doesn't the document say anything about my duties?" Ji Dai's eyes flickered as he said in a cold voice, "After the king of East Sea is promoted to nobility, what he will be in charge of will be decided by the kings of the Imperial Council." Wuqi spread his hands and sighed. "So you're saying that I'm just a mere figurehead? You're taking away my property and sending me to Liangzhu to retire? Hey, what do you mean by that? Burning the bridge after crossing the river, killing the donkey after the millstone has been removed. Are you out of your mind? Is this King Yangshan's idea? Or is it some other king who made the decision? TSK, does His Majesty know about this?" "King of East Sea, what's done can't be undone," Yu Qingqing said unyieldingly. "It's a done deal." The 8 generals with the cultivation base of Hongmeng Panga Heaven standing next to Yu Qingqing roared, "King of East Sea, please hurry to Liangzhu and promote me to the throne of King Baishan." Their thunderous roars shook the hundreds of longbow soldiers who had surrounded Ji Dai, Yu Qingqing, and the others, and blood trickled down the corners of their mouths. They roared in unison, their bodies swelling to about a mile tall, and their heads nearly smashed a hole in the ceiling of the Great Hall. Only the Great Hall in the King of East Sea's mansion was so spacious that it could accommodate hundreds of longbow men, who had suddenly transformed into Dharma bodies. Suddenly, a thunderous roar rang out from outside the East Sea city. "King of East Sea, please hurry to Liangzhu and promote me to the throne of King Baishan." The roar shook the houses in the East Sea city, and it was made by at least hundreds of thousands of human warriors whose cultivation bases had reached the realm of Second Pangu Heaven. At the same time, 12 extremely strong waves of magic power enveloped the East Sea city, and their mighty divine senses smashed toward Wuqi in an unreasonable manner. as if they were going to crush Wuqi's divine sense into pieces by relying on their numbers. Wuxia suddenly looked up and asked with a sweet smile, "Can I eat them?" Wuqi nodded slowly as he sensed the 12 streams of divine sense, which were at the level of supreme oracles. Laughing loudly, Wuxia reached out her little hand and made a grabbing motion. 12 black ripples that looked like fishing nets flashed in the void, and shrill howls rang out. With a shake of her hand, the black ripples turned into billowing black smoke and disappeared into Wuxia's palm. Black smoke continued to pour out of the void like an endless river. Horrified screams came from the sky above East Sea City. The terrifying screams lasted for a full quarter of an hour before the black smoke in the void gradually disappeared. Muffled thuds came from the entrance of the hall. 12 dried corpses of old men in black robes smashed heavily in front of the hall's entrance. The corpses that didn't have any water left were smashed into pieces, and a layer of smoke suddenly rose up. The scene was extremely tragic. The 8 supreme oracles who guarded Ji-Dai and the others in the great hall swallowed with difficulty. The dead supreme oracles who were killed by Wuxia were their companions, and they had stayed outside the city to lead the army to threaten the East Sea. But they never dreamed that Wuxia's means were so terrible that not only had she killed 12 supreme oracles from a distance, but she had also moved their bodies over the Great Hall and left them there. Ji-Dai and Yu Qingcheng, who had been arrogant and domineering just a moment ago, turned pale with fear. They stared at Wuxia in horror and suddenly realized what the aura emanating from Wuxia was. It was the dangerous aura of a predator at the top of the food chain. It was just that Ji-Dai and Yu Qingcheng had never realized this, so they had overlooked the dangerous aura emanating from Wuxia. Wuxia burped contentedly, then gently patted her belly, and said to Wuqi in a soft voice, "They are very satisfied. I just need a few more." Wuxia's words made Wuqi shudder, and his scalp go numb. They were the 360,000 children of Wuqi and Wuxia. The thought of this made Wuqi's hair stand on end. He could not believe that he and the patriarch of invisible heavenly fiends had given birth to a group of invisible heavenly fiends. Princess Zhongli glanced enviously at Wuxia's belly and gently rubbed it. She only had one child in her belly, and it would take another 3 eons for the child to be born. Moreover, one could not accelerate time to give birth to a child. One must collect enough energy of heaven and earth from the outside world to make the child grow smoothly. Once time was accelerated, the child might be born prematurely. While the 2 little girls were lost in their own thoughts, Wuqi slapped the document to pieces. Staring coldly at Ji-Dai, he said in a low voice, "I don't think what the document says is good. I want the title of King Baishan. From now on, I, Wuqi, am to use King Baishan, one of the 18 kings of the Imperial Council. As for the foundation of the East Sea, I can't give it to you." Ji-Dai's face twitched. "King of East Sea," he said through clenched teeth. Wuqi slapped Ji-Dai to the ground, nearly killing him. The restrictive spell that the 8 supreme oracles had jointly laid out was broken by him, and the slap sent him rolling on the ground. "Call me King Baishan," Wuqi said coldly. "Then, all of you will crawl out of the East Sea." Who dares to walk on 2 legs? Somebody call Catfish. Before Wuqi's voice could fade, a group of murderous and arsonistic fiends of the East Sea, including Ao Buzin, Immortal Jadebone, Catfish and others, had already broken into the Great Hall. A terrible aura filled the hall as everyone fixed their eyes on Ji-Dai and his companions. Yu Qingqing's legs gave way, and he was the first to drop to his knees. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.